My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 411 to 416. Chapter 411. The God's Descent. That is the method. Master, will you remember it? Under Reed's request, Watson quickly taught Reed the method he had developed through prayers. It's that simple? Then, can I obtain the same ability as a god? Reed did not find Watson's words difficult. On the contrary, he was a little puzzled because it was too simple. Watson gave him a few prayers and told him that as long as someone used those prayers to pray sincerely to him, he would be able to sense them. That's right, it's that simple. If you don't believe me, Master, you can try it on anyone. Watson nodded in response. Reed looked around and paused on Samuel's body for a while. Then, his gaze fell on a slightly plump disciple in the distance. You, come here, Master, you called for me? That slightly plump disciple was considered the weakest of all the disciples. He is only at the peak of gold tier. Since Watson had just promoted Samuel, Reed felt like it was inappropriate for Samuel to pray to him, so he chose that disciple. From now on, I will teach you a prayer. You have to pray to me according to that prayer. Remember to pray sincerely. Reed taught the prayer that Watson had just taught him to his disciple and instructed him a few times. When the slightly chubby disciple in front of him heard that, he first respectfully agreed. Then, he muttered in his heart. He did not expect Reed to ask him to pray to him. Praying was something one did for a god. Even though he was usually respectful to Reed, it was not to the extent that he would pray to the man. He wondered if his master had some deeper meaning in asking him to do that. With doubts in his heart, that disciple still did as Reed said. Along with the prayer, the slightly chubby disciple's body did not change at all. He was stunned on the spot. Reed also appeared to be very embarrassed, and his face darkened. Did you not pray to me attentively, or did you say the prayer incorrectly? No, Master, I did not say it wrong. The slightly plump disciple was so scared by Reed that he almost cried. He repeated the prayer with an aggrieved expression, but there was still no reaction. Master, is there something wrong with the prayer itself? He did not know why his master asked him to pray, and he did not understand why his master was angry. Should something happen to his body after his prayer? Since that was the case, should he pretend that there were some changes in his next prayer? Watson, didn't you say that you could establish a connection with the other party as long as they prayed? Why can't I do that? Reed had no choice but to turn his head to ask Watson. Watson also scratched his head in confusion and said, it should not be. He gestured at his slightly chubby senior brother. Senior brother, please tell me what you just said to Master. All right, junior brother Watson. The slightly chubby disciple followed Watson's instructions and obediently recited the prayer. Then, a layer of light suddenly appeared on his body. That layer of light was completely made up of sword aura. Wherever the light passed, the ground would be dissolved. I feel a change. I feel that junior brother Watson and I seem to have a mysterious connection. A lot of knowledge is surging from junior brother Watson's mind. Holding his head, that peak gold tier disciple subconsciously extended his right hand. Sword blades that could cut through the sky appeared and shot out in all directions. The sword chi drew deep ravines on the ground, leaving behind cracks in the air. Platinum tier infinite sword slash. In just an instant, that peak gold tier disciple had grasped something that he could not have grasped before. Well, he is at peak gold tier. It is a little low. Even if I taught him all of my sword technique knowledge, he would not be able to grasp it completely. Unleashing a peak platinum tier fighting technique is the limit. Watson watched from the side. He muttered in his heart and made a judgment. Watson, what is going on? Why is it that my disciple can pray to you but not to me? Reed's expression darkened when he saw that scene. Was his level not high enough that he could not accept his disciple's faith? However, Watson could do it. Was he not as good as Watson? I don't know what's going on either, Master. Initially, Watson thought that as long as he used that method, anyone could accept faith. It seemed like he was the only one who could accept faith. If he could use that method to bestow power to others, then there was no lack of intelligent people in the kingdom for the next hundreds of years. They should have thought of that method long ago and not Watson. Perhaps there were some special conditions other than the other party's sincere prayer to receive the faith of others. Watson, think about the loopholes in that method. I'll get all the disciples in the courtyard to come here. Together with Christina, you'll make them believe in you and see if they can obtain your power, Reed said with some excitement. On the one hand, he wanted to obtain that method. On the other hand, he also hoped that Watson would pass his power to others instead of him. Watson's talent was stronger than his. Even if he were not his match then, he would definitely surpass him in the future. He would make those people believe in Watson. It was exciting to think that all of his disciples would become talented elites. All right, Master, I will study it again when I receive the faith later to see what went wrong. As for Miss Christina, she doesn't need to come over because she already put her faith in me during the day. Watson, when did you become so close to my daughter? Reed showed a puzzled look. The young man kept mentioning Christina. He even gave priority to Christina in the abilities he could impart. Obviously, their relationship was quite extraordinary. Then, I'm afraid it will be difficult to end it without a marriage. Watson, I've decided that I'm going to marry Tina to you. You'll have to take care of her from now onward. On second thought, that was a good thing. Reed laughed loudly. If he let Christina be with Watson, he would be able to tie Watson to their family. Even though he became Watson's master after a certain someone, if Watson were with Christina, his relationship with Watson would be closer than that certain someone. He wanted to laugh when he saw that person's exasperated look. Reed, you old fox. I disagree with that. Who Watson likes is his own business. Furthermore, Watson is still too young. He should put all his attention on cultivation and should not waste time on relationships. Antonio was so angry that he stomped his feet. DMN that Reed. He had used a honey trap. Antonio did not have a daughter. Otherwise, he would have been betrothed one to Watson a long time ago. How would Reed get a chance? If it were not because one could not be Watson's family, who would want to be Watson's master? Your objection is invalid. I am Watson's master. He will definitely listen to me. I'm also Watson's master. How about that? Let's fight. Whoever wins will get Watson will listen to him. Come, let's fight. I'm not afraid of you. In an instant, the atmosphere between Antonio and Reed became tense. One of them took out his crown staff, while the other had the thread of destiny around him. Seeing that the battle was about to start, Watson weakly stretched out his hand. Masters, didn't you want me to find the secret of receiving faith? Why are you fighting? Master Antonio, you're right. Feelings are indeed unnecessary for me at the moment, so I don't want to be with anyone. But the future is not certain yet. Master Reed, you're not wrong either. Miss Christina is a good person. I think most men will fall in love with her when they see her. But we're not suitable for each other, so I said you should not fight. Watson, shut up. Reed and Antonio turned their heads at the same time and scolded him angrily. That made Watson feel aggrieved. He just wanted to mediate the fight. What did he do wrong? Why were the two masters so furious with him? It takes a lot of time and effort to absorb faith. It's not easy to extract a little faith from the mouths of those vampires who call themselves gods. At the king's bedroom in the imperial palace, King Landhar III sat cross-legged in the hidden chamber in the basement. A green oil lamp was placed in front of him. Blood-colored twisted strange symbols spread in the direction of the light. The shadows on the wall reflected by the light were weird and horrifying. A giant ball of light with brilliant colors was born from the symbols and flew into the king's mouth and nose. Your Majesty, don't complain anymore. If it weren't for our transformation, you wouldn't even be able to absorb the power of faith. Faith is something that only a divine kingdom can carry. If one hasn't reached Starlight Tier, even if one has mastered the building techniques for the divine kingdom, forcibly fusing it will only cause the faith to be lost, unless... A shadow on the wall squirmed and made a sound. Halfway through his words, the shadow suddenly quieted. Unless what? Nothing. The shadow who had just spoken did not intend to continue talking about that and changed the topic. Speaking of which, Your Majesty, it has been a long time since you agreed to our last request. We have provided you with faith, but you have not fulfilled your obligation to bring the youth to us. When will you be able to fulfill your promise? I would like to talk to you about that. I have already arranged for someone to be placed in the Sword Saint's courtyard. If you want to obtain the results, you will have to wait patiently. Perhaps you can give me some god's remains. I will form an army that is close to the Starlight Tier and charge into the Sword Saint's courtyard to get Watson. King Landhar III did not answer. Instead, he asked a question in return. His gaze swept over the strangely shaped gods' projections on the wall. He sneered in his heart. Those so-called gods were no different from humans, they were also motivated by benefits. However, he still had not figured out what those gods saw in Watson. After observing Watson for the past few days, he discovered that Watson was quite remarkable. He was able to make Antonio and the Sword Saint value him at the same time. Firstly, he had extraordinary talents. Secondly, during the battle between Watson and the Campbell family, he learned some strange things from Hone. For example, Watson had mastered the art of fusion. The gods were definitely not interested in Watson's talent. Perhaps it had something to do with that fusion magic. King Landhar III thought about it for a while, then he said, "The reason I failed is because of Sidi. When Watson first came to the capital, I had already prepared a countermeasure. I let Sidi possess the body of a unicorn. I gave you a chance to catch Watson with your own hands. You can't blame me for not grasping it, right? Furthermore, after that, I had ordered the country's elites to capture Watson. In the end, Watson was too powerful for them. He almost destroyed an archduke's family, and he also injured one of my strongest generals. I didn't even ask for compensation from you. Shouldn't you have some faith in me?" King Landhar's words caused the gods' projections on the wall to fall silent. After a moment, Sidi's displeased ear-piercing voice said, "King Landhar III, why are you blaming me for that? Indeed, I made a mistake the first time, but didn't I make up for it? I even gave you the remains of the highly toxic god. That's a part of my divine kingdom. At least I've made efforts to capture Watson. Unlike the other gods who haven't made a move yet, so you can't blame me." "All right, Sidi, we don't blame you. In any case, capture Watson as soon as possible. If this drags on any longer, it will only allow that youth to grow. When that time comes, it will be troublesome if we want to do anything. This time, I've decided to make a move personally." The person who spoke was the god of light, Balder, the leader of the 7 gods. After his voice fell, the shadows of the other gods on the wall began to discuss that. "Balder, you want to make a move personally? Don't tell me you want to descend into the mortal realm? Interfering with the mortals is forbidden to the gods, you know that." In the face of his companion's doubts, Balder still spoke in a calm tone. "Of course, I know that is against the rules. Once it is discovered, the other gods might attack me. But for the sake of that youth, I'll just have to take a gamble, won't I?" "That's true, Balder. If that's the case, we can't let you descend alone. We can come with you, so you don't have to go against that youth by yourself." The gods' thoughts had changed in mere seconds. That scene caused King Landhar's eyes to flicker. It seemed like those gods had to pay the price when they entered the mortal world. Those gods did not hesitate to be punished for entering the mortal realm. They would do that for Watson. What was it about Watson that made them so infatuated? If he could find that secret before those gods. "After arguing for so long, it's time for you to rest. I have no objections to your proposal to descend into the kingdom. After all, the descent of the gods can make the people more devout. However, you have to explain to me what you need so I can prepare for your descent." It was definitely not that simple to let the gods descend. It might even require a large number of resources to do so. First, you'll have to prepare 7 bodies. Those 7 people have to be at least platinum tier or have the strength of a platinum tier elite. Secondly, the best age for those 7 people should not be more than 18 years old. That is the most basic condition for us to possess their bodies. I will tell you the other conditions after you have prepared those bodies. Balder's gentle voice echoed in the secret chamber. "Then I will see you next time. I will go and make preparations for that." After he cut off the connection with the gods, King Landhar III remained silent for a long while before leaving the secret chamber with the oil lamp in his hand. He returned to the empty bedroom and sat on the bed, deep in thought. Those 7 gods are going to descend to get Watson. The plan regarding the gods needs to be revised. If the gods could descend, then his plan would become more stable. At the same time, another bold idea arose in the king's mind. While he was sorting out the plan, his subordinate's voice suddenly came from outside. "Your Majesty, General Hone requests an audience. He says he has something important to report to you." After the inquiry, his subordinate had been holding his breath outside. He understood the king's rules. He could not make any unusual movements until the king responded to him. Even if it were a significant matter, he had to ask every 10 minutes, even though he did not know the use of such a strange rule was. Those who did not follow the rules were all dead. I understand. Let him in. King Landhar III closed the door to the secret room and acted as if everything was normal. He walked toward the desk, lifted the teapot, and poured 2 cups of hot tea, waiting for Hone to enter. Before long, Hone, who was dressed in armor, came into the room. King Landhar III pointed to the seat opposite him and motioned for Hone to sit down. He picked up a teacup and took a sip. Hone, I rarely see you in such a hurry. Tell me, what happened? Your Majesty, I have some bad news. I don't know if I should tell you. Tell me. Yes, Your Majesty. First of all, it's the Severed Fingers gang. Originally, they were an underground force in the kingdom. I know that we usually eliminate them when we want to get rid of some specific people. However, I learned that someone had reorganized the gang, and they are now a legitimate organization. Reorganized Severed Fingers? Who has the ability to do that? Quote, I don't know who that person is, but he calls himself the Black Emperor. After Hone said the person's name, King Landhar III squeezed the teacup slightly, causing it to make a cracking sound. Then, he took a sip of tea as if nothing had happened. The Black Emperor? What a mouthful. Go on. Is there anything else I should know? The rest of the matter is also related to the Severed Fingers gang. After their reorganization, a batch of drinks named the Sun Wine and Moon Wine suddenly appeared in the capital. It is said that they were brewed from sun and moon gems produced in the Forest of Eternity. At the same time, a batch of platinum-tier items appeared in the capital. They were all made by famous craftsmen. According to the nobleman who bought those weapons were sold by the Severed Fingers gang, and as he spoke, Hone observed the king's expression. He realized that the king's face did not change. He heaved a sigh of relief and told the king of a ridiculous thing he had heard. Also, Your Majesty, it's about the Dragon Knight Legion. One of the dragons was killed. Someone said they saw the remains of a thunderclawed dragon in the Holy Dragon Tavern's kitchen. It had been cooked. Hearing that, King Landhar III could not hold it in any longer. He spat a mouthful of tea on Hone's face. He was in shock. Hone wiped his face and smiled bitterly. That was the first time he had seen King Landhar III, who had always kept a straight face, show such an expression, but he did not find it strange at all. When he first heard the news, his reaction was 10 times stronger than the king's. Chapter 412. Watson's First Move. Hone, did I hear correctly? One of the dragons I raised in the capital was killed and cooked? King Landhar III could not help but ask as he took out a handkerchief to wipe his wet lips. Hone could ignore King Landhar III, but the dragons were different. Among the dragons raised in the capital, there were thunderclawed dragons, gale dragons, frost dragons, and other platinum-tier dragons. He had exchanged all of those dragons with the dragon race through an agreement. Once the dragon race found out about that, it was likely that they would not sign any other agreement with the royal city. The kingdom's dragon knights would also become empty talk. Did the Black Emperor plan on killing the dragons? King Landhar III's eyes narrowed, and there was a cold glint flashing in them. That person who called himself the Black Emperor must have been hostile to the kingdom. First, he reorganized the Severed Fingers gang and used it to monopolize the kingdom's underground forces. Then, he used the killing of the dragon race to demonstrate his power to King Landhar III. He also stirred up a conflict between the kingdom and the dragon race. In King Landhar III's opinion, the Black Emperor probably had that goal. Yes, Your Majesty, that is right, Hone respectfully replied. It seems like I will have to make a trip to the Holy Dragon Tavern later. Previously, I let the people with the Severed Fingers gang exist because they are useful to me. Count Grey, who is behind the Holy Dragon Tavern, has been selling fake wine in the capital. In the past, I have turned a blind eye to that matter. I even helped the Holy Dragon Tavern write a golden signboard. Now is the time for him to return all of that. The Severed Fingers should not continue to exist because there can only be one king in the capital and even in that country. King Landhar III's expression was calm, but his words sent chills down people's spines. Even someone as powerful as Hone could not help but shudder. Other than that, Hone, is there anything else you want to tell me? There's one more thing, it's about Watson. At the mention of Watson, Hone noticed that King Landhar III's attention had suddenly become focused. He thought that the king indeed paid a lot of attention to that youth. He said, "Watson has been out frequently these past 2 days. He often goes to the Holy Dragon Tavern. Today, someone saw Watson with the 3 Archduke's children. In addition to going to the Holy Dragon Tavern, Watson was also at Count Grey's manor. Today, he even had contact with the Severed Fingers gang's higher-ups. Among them, Klein and Marcus were the 2 people who were in contact with him. Marcus used the bank event as a cover to give Watson 10 million gold coins, while Klein gave Watson a diamond-tier holy relic known as the Holy Sword of Time. Everything in the kingdom was under the king's supervision. Just as the king said, he did not destroy the Severed Fingers gang because they were useful to him. Previously, the kingdom had tried to destroy the Severed Fingers gang without any results, but it was all a play directed by King Landhar III. Hone knew that very well, and they even had spies with the Severed Fingers gang. That day, Hone had gone to meet King Landhar III. The main reason was not because of the Severed Fingers gang, nor was it because of the dead dragon, but because of Watson. Ever since Watson had used a Starlight-tier sword against the Campbell family, he had been suppressed to the point of kneeling on the ground. That youth had always lingered in his mind, causing him nightmares many times at night. "Your Majesty, according to my guess, the Severed Fingers gang's higher-ups have been in contact with Watson so frequently, and they did not hesitate to send him something. Are they trying to rope Watson in? Or, perhaps Watson is the person who reorganized the Severed Fingers gang, and that's why those people are so respectful to him." After hesitating for a moment, Hone raised his own opinion. If that were the case, then it would be too scary. If someone told him that a teenager could suppress the gang's vicious leader and become their leader, that person must have gone mad. However, if it was Watson, he did not doubt it at all. Watson might be the person who reorganized the gang, but the possibility is not high. If he was the person who did that, then their resources are now in his hands. Is there a need for those people to give those things to him? Is it not superfluous? Quote, King Landhar III shook his head. Just like how, as a king, everything in the kingdom was his. If he wanted something, would he need Hone to gift him? Of course, if Watson is really the Black Emperor, it's not impossible for him to deliberately do that to confuse us. As for the specifics, I just need to go to the Holy Dragon Tavern to take a look. Hone, you might need to prepare a carriage for me, depending on the answer from the gang's higher-ups. I will consider whether or not to eradicate the Severed Fingers gang. It's too naive to think that I can control the royal city just because I control the underground forces. I must let the Black Emperor understand that everything in this kingdom belongs to me, and so do the underground forces. Yes, Your Majesty. After King Landhar III gave the order, Hone nodded respectfully and began to arrange the carriage. Soon, a carriage left the palace and secretly headed to the Holy Dragon Tavern. At the same time, in the Sword Saint's courtyard, even though I'm now at the peak of gold tier, I feel that even a platinum tier elite is no match for me. I can't believe that junior brother Watson has so much knowledge in his mind, and he is willing to impart it to us. If we had known earlier, why would we still cultivate? Wouldn't it be better to wait to receive junior brother's knowledge? Quote, all of Reed's disciples had put their faith in Watson, and they had received Watson's gift. They looked at their hands as they felt the large amount of knowledge that appeared in their minds, and they looked excited. Other than Samuel and the other 3 disciples, the rest of Reed's disciples were not as strong as platinum tier elites. They were only gold tier. Of course, even if they were gold tier, they were far stronger than experts of the same level. It was not a problem for them to fight 10 people by themselves. However, after receiving Watson's knowledge, they were no longer limited to fighting 10 people. Instead, they could fight 100 people. You bunch of idiots, how dare you speak such lazy words? If you don't cultivate, can you become my disciples and wait until the day you receive Watson's knowledge? Furthermore, if you inherit knowledge from others, can it be more solid than the ability you obtained through cultivation? Reed was not far away from those disciples. Seeing his disciples complacent just because they had received the power bestowed by others made him a little angry. After his scolding, the group of disciples did not dare to say anything. However, they were refuting it in their hearts. The power that they had cultivated could not be compared to the power that Watson had given them. That was because the power that Watson had given them was 100 times more solid than the power that they had cultivated. Otherwise, they would not have been able to comprehend diamond-tier sword techniques in 100 years, let alone master the kingdom of the sword. Reed sighed. He knew that his disciples disagreed with his words. Watson, you have already turned my disciples into your believers. Have you figured out what's wrong with the method of absorbing faith that you have taught me? I'm sorry, Master, I haven't found a solution yet. Perhaps there's nothing wrong with the method I taught you, but there's a limit to that method, so I can only use it myself. Why don't I try again? Quote, Watson scratched his head. He had tried repeatedly with several people, but he did not find any problems because he had never tried to make others absorb the faith of others like him before. He had thought that anyone could use that method, but it seemed like he was wrong. He could use it because he was special. The only thing that was more special than Reed and Antonio was the system. Forget it, Watson, you don't have to try anymore. It's good that only you can use it. That way, you can give great powers to your followers, and you can avoid betrayal. Quote, Reed waved his hand. He had wanted to learn that trick, so he was a little disappointed in his words, but he quickly covered it up. Watson had to have a lot of soldiers to overthrow the king, and those soldiers would rather believe in Watson than him. Not to mention what they could get from Watson. At least after they believed in Watson, they would be unable to betray him. Samuel, who initially hated Watson, had also believed in Watson. Since Master said so, okay. Watson looked a little guilty. It was he who had said something that Reed had expected, but he did not do it. Watson, you don't have to blame yourself for not fulfilling what you just said. If you feel guilty, then I have a way. Antonio, who had been watching everything from a distance, suddenly stroked his chin. At that moment, he smiled and said, I saw someone give you a diamond-tier holy relic, the Holy Sword of Time. If you feel guilty, you can give that weapon to me and help me improve the quality of my weapon. Antonio, you took advantage of the situation and made such a request to your own disciple. Are you still human? Reed, at least I didn't sell out my daughter. Compared to you, I'm still very open and honest. Let's not talk about that. Antonio, isn't your crown staff strong enough? At least it's stronger than the thread of destiny. Even if you want to fuse and improve it, you should let Watson fuse mine first. Seeing that the two masters were about to quarrel again, Watson looked like he had a headache. He waved his hand. Masters, don't quarrel. I don't intend to give that holy relic to the two of you because I've been planning to make a handy weapon for myself. Also, didn't you go to the Campbell family to ask for the holy relic? Since they could get the holy relic from the Campbell family, why would they covet it? Reed and Antonio suddenly felt a bit awkward. Well, we can't get more holy relics from the Campbell family. They had been paying daily visits to the Campbells during those days. At first, the head of the Campbell family served them well and chatted with them, but after knowing that they were there to ask for the holy relic, the head of the Campbell family, Armand, had told them to get out. In fact, the man had gone into hiding and refused to see them. Then, Newman, McGee, and other disciples were the ones to see them, and they had rejected their requests. They were even more clueless when asked questions. I see. Watson revealed a look of understanding. He never thought that his two masters would be able to keep asking for weapons from the Campbell family. After all, the Campbell family was not a charity organization. Well, I've gotten to know some people in the capital. They might have information about the holy relics. When they have some, I'll buy them and fuse them with your weapons as soon as possible. What do you think? Really? Watson, thank you so much. You're really a good disciple. Don't worry. As a reward for upgrading our weapons, we'll help you fulfill any request you have. Even if you let Antonio and I become your believers now, we'll still consider it. Antonio and Reed looked at each other in excitement at Watson's words. Watson sighed when he saw their excitement. He sighed. He did not feel like he was Antonio and Reed's disciple. Instead, he felt like their master. He helped fuse their weapons and also helped the people in the courtyard improve their strength. Even if they believed in him, it would only benefit Antonio and Reed. As for the person who had information about the holy relics, it was him, who was the leader of the Severed Fingers gang. Initially, the holy relics were taken from the ancient ruins in the kingdom. Many ancient ruins were still sealed, waiting to be excavated. As long as he waited for Elvin to establish a nationwide intelligence network, he would be able to obtain that information. Even if he did not search those undiscovered ruins, not all of the ruins were in the hands of the king. As long as the price was right, he could buy them. He had to create a suitable weapon for himself before the Royal Academy reopened. The next step is to wait for the establishment of the intelligence network, and we'd be on the right track. Before that, I still have to pass through the king. Calculating the time, if the king weren't an idiot, he would have already received the news that the Severed Fingers gang had changed. What's next is to see how he will deal with it, Watson thought as he turned his head to look at the distant sky. What he was looking at was the deepest part of the royal city, the area known as the Royal Palace. It had been nearly half a month since he had arrived in the royal city, and he had obtained the initial pieces. He began to take the first step toward the king. At the Red Dragon area in the Holy Dragon Tavern, King Landhar III was sitting on a chair, and a maid was pouring tea for him. Hone stood behind him quietly. Dressed in armor, he was like the god of war, pressuring Count Grey, who was also in front of the king, to lower his head and bow. It was as if he could not breathe. "Grey, the tea here is still as good as ever. Do you know why I'm here today?" King Landhar III picked up the teacup and took a sip. He seemed to be nonchalant as he spoke. "I don't know, Your Majesty. It has been almost 10 years since I wrote the plaque for your tavern. Time really flies." King Landhar III turned his head and looked around, sighing. The last time he went there was because he wanted to meet Samuel. He had to avoid everyone else. That was one of the few times he was there. "I'll feel sorry for razing such a place to the ground. Your Majesty, what are you going to do? Why would you destroy this place? Did I do something wrong?" Grey knelt on the ground with a plop, his clothes wet with sweat. "Before answering that question, I have to ask a question. Who is the Black Emperor?" "That." Grey looked troubled. "If you tell me, I might be able to spare your life. Otherwise, everyone in your family, from the elderly to the children, will all die." The Severed Fingers gang's hideout had been discovered. Hundreds of suspected members had died of unnatural death. Presumably, everyone would know about that the next day. King Landhar III spoke unhurriedly, his words containing intense pressure. Grey gritted his teeth and said, "Your Majesty, I'll tell you everything. Please don't touch my family members. Speak. Remember not to lie. Lying to me is an unwise decision. The Black Emperor only appeared in the royal city not long ago. As for who he is, I don't know. The Black Emperor is elusive, so I've never seen him. Instead, he sends another person to meet me." "Who is that?" "Your Majesty, you know him too. He is Watson, who has recently become very famous in the capital," Grey replied hurriedly. King Landhar III stared intently into his eyes as though wanting to see some clues. However, he did not see any obvious signs of lying. "Watson? It's Watson again. What is the relationship between that youth and the Black Emperor? Are they the same person? If they were the same person, what is the point of disguising as the Black Emperor? Furthermore, is it possible for a youth to intimidate the gang's higher-ups?" King Landhar III was silent for a moment. He stood up, turned around, and walked out. "Grey, I told you not to lie to me. But you did. It seems like you have a lot of guts. Hone, deal with him, and then expel all the guests from the Holy Dragon Tavern. Leave none of the staff behind." He did not know whether Grey was lying or not. That was not important. What was important was that he thought Grey was lying. He did not plan to let Grey go that day. If Grey could not withstand the pressure, he would tell the truth before he died. At the same time, the other Severed Fingers higher-ups who learned that Grey had died would also become nervous. King Landhar III wanted to capture those people one by one, interrogate them separately, and combine all their testimonies. That way, he would be able to get a complete answer. After killing those Severed Fingers members, he could arrange for some of his men to become the leader of the Severed Fingers gang again and take back that underground force. Having made up his mind, King Landhar III was about to step out of the room when Hone, who was behind him, raised his hand and was about to attack Grey, who was kneeling on the ground. Suddenly, Grey raised his head. His expression was no longer as fearful as before. Instead, it had become calm. "Your Majesty, you can't kill me yet. Just as you said, I lied just now." "Oh, then are you ready to tell the truth now?" "No, I'm going to take you to a place. When we get there, even if I don't say anything, you will understand everything, Your Majesty." Grey rose from the ground as he spoke, a smile on his face. As Watson's fused subordinate, he would always carry out Watson's orders. Watson had long anticipated that King Landhar III would find out that something was wrong with the Severed Fingers gang and suppress them. Thus, he had prepared a countermeasure in advance. Bringing the king to that place was Watson's first step. Chapter 413. The king joins the severed finger. At Count Grey's manor. Grey, that is the place where you brought me. Why did you bring me here? King Landhar III looked around as he spoke in a dignified voice. The manor in front of him was Count Grey's property. King Landhar III knew that. There was nothing special about the manor. Your Majesty, you will know when you go in. Grey's expression was calm as he walked into the manor first. The moment he entered the manor, Count Grey's body disappeared from view. That scene made the king anxious. Even Hone, who was beside him, also frowned. He moved closer to his side and whispered, Your Majesty, it seems that manor has been enchanted. Should we be more cautious and call more soldiers to prevent any danger when we enter later? There's no need for that. I'm already here, but I'm standing still at the door. If the so-called Black Emperor finds out about that, would I not be a joke to him? Besides, don't I have you? With you, no matter how bold those people are, they won't dare to do anything to me. The king's expression was calm as he said that, causing Hone to shut his mouth and stop consoling him. He only focused his attention there. The king trusted him so much. If he were to let anything happen to the king, it would be a massive crime. King Landhar III did not know Hone's thoughts. He dared to bring Hone to that courtyard not because Hone was a platinum tier elite but because his own strength was at the peak of diamond tier. Furthermore, there were 7 gods' projections that were guarding him. If the Black Emperor had set up an ambush in that courtyard, it would align with his intentions. He could take the opportunity to capture the Black Emperor and the others in one fell swoop. After making up his mind, King Landhar III began to walk into the courtyard. Count Grey, let me see what exactly is in that manor. What was the Black Emperor up to that time? Quote, as he entered, King Landhar III saw a courtyard that overlapped in the sky and stretched for an unknown number of meters. The courtyard area in the sky was 10 times larger than the manor itself, and it was filled with plants. There were also various houses. People wearing different clothes spread their combat aura wings and flew into the courtyard, carrying various items and placing them on different levels. What is that? Hone exclaimed in disbelief. He knew that magic had been cast on the manor in front of him, but he did not expect the scene inside the manor to be like that. 8 huge courtyards were floating in the sky, looking even more magnificent than the palace. Plus, how were they floating? Was it some kind of wind magic? Hone was astonished, and a hint of silence appeared in the eyes of King Landhar III, followed by a deep killing intent. How could he not know that such a magnificent building had been built right under his nose in the capital? The so-called Black Emperor's actions had violated his rights and interests. If he could create such a courtyard, the Black Emperor could also create many other things. If he did not control it, his rule would be threatened. After entering the courtyard, Count Grey, who had disappeared, emerged again in front of the 2 people. King Landhar III could not help but say, Grey, is that courtyard what you want to show me? I can see it now. That does not change the outcome of your death. If there is any change, it is that, other than you, everyone here will die too. Your Majesty, those are not all that I want to show you. I believe that after you've seen all of them, you won't say such things anymore. Count Grey chuckled. He spread the light elemental combat aura wings that symbolized a gold tier elite and flew straight toward the 3rd courtyard in the sky. King Landhar III gave Hone a look, and Hone immediately understood as an earth elemental domain spread under his feet. A rocky mountain protruded from the ground, carrying him and King Landhar III as they flew toward the sky. Who is casting magic in the courtyard? Look at that person. He seems to be General Hone, who is known as the kingdom's Iron Wall. Is the person next to him wearing royal clothes? Hone and King Landhar III's actions were too prominent, and many Severed Fingers members had noticed it. Those members turned their heads to look at the 2 of them, and some of them recognized Hone and King Landhar III. Cries of surprise rang out, and there was fear on their faces. As members of the underground forces, the kingdom regarded them as vermin, and the king had always wanted to kill them. Even though they were no longer criminals under Watson's rule, they still feared the king. When they saw the king, they thought that the king had discovered that secret base and was about to make a move on them. That's the king. I saw him when he gave a speech in the capital. Don't worry, he must have come here with Count Grey. He must have other reasons to be here other than to kill us. Some of the members were more compliant. They pointed at Count Grey, who had led the way before the king, and comforted their companions. If the king were there to eliminate them, then Count Grey would not have led him there. Instead, he would have been tied up or shackled. It was impossible for the king to have gone there by himself. Instead, he would have sent thousands of soldiers and horses to flatten that place. The other members in the vicinity began to relax. On the one hand, they knew that the king's goal was not to destroy them. On the other hand, they were all gold-tier elites then. Even if they were not a match for the entire kingdom's army, if they wanted to escape, the kingdom's army would not be able to stop them. As the Severed Fingers gang members looked at King Landhar III and Hone, the two men also looked at the gang members around them. They only panicked for a moment before reverting to their original state. They were doing what they were supposed to do. That made King Landhar III's eyes shine with a strange light. Those people clearly recognize me, but they don't seem to be afraid of me. Is it because they do not respect me? No, that should not be the reason. Even though he did not know what the Black Emperor had said to those people and made them lose their fear, King Landhar III was more interested in the Black Emperor. While he was thinking, King Landhar III was standing on the mountain peak created by Hone's fighting technique. He had already flown past the first level of the courtyard. Looking down, he saw countless thick trees in the courtyard. Those trees had many red or silver-white fruits. The strange thing was that those fruits did not grow on the trees. Instead, they were hung on the trees. There were ribbons on the fruits, and the ribbons wrapped around the branches of the trees. Those fruits were flowing with flickering light as if it was breathing. One could feel the dazzling light just by looking at it from afar. The fresh air filled the space, and one could not help but want to take a deep breath. As the air entered one's lungs, the sweet air would rush straight to one's head, making one feel invigorated. Count Grey, answer me. What are those fruits? As a knowledgeable king, King Landhar III already had an answer in his heart. However, he was not sure if that answer was correct. Your Majesty, those are the sun gems and moon gems from the Forest of Eternity in the south. Consuming one will allow one to advance to gold tier, and at the same time awaken the cultivation talent of light or dark elements. Grey stopped flying as he explained to King Landhar III. It is as I expected. King Landhar III's eyes flickered, but his heart was filled with great waves. There was a time when he wanted to attain immortality, so he sent envoys to the Elven Kingdom in the Forest of Eternity to obtain a portion of the spring water of life. Thus, he had some understanding of the Forest of Eternity. He knew that the entire Forest of Eternity was actually an illusion of a world tree, and that the spring of life was the sap of the world tree. There was also a fruit that absorbed the water from the spring of life and was born on the world tree's trunk, and that was the sun and moon gem. Unfortunately, the Elven Kingdom did not agree to his request. They did not give him any water from the spring of life of the sun and moon gem. He knew what that fruit looked like because the magic staff that Antonio had used before, the sun and moon divine staff, was the branch of a world tree, and there was a sun gem condensed on it. Even Antonio, who had a close relationship with the elves, only had a sun gem that had not fully matured. However, the courtyard he was in was full of such fruits, and there were at least 100,000 of them in total. It made King Landhar III wonder if he was dreaming. What he awakened was his talent for light and darkness cultivation, which was enough to sweep through everything. Just as King Landhar III was considering the scene in front of him, he suddenly heard Count Grey's words. Your Majesty, those sun and moon gems were created by the Black Emperor via special methods. Other than the Forest of Eternity, the only other place in the world that has such a large number of sun and moon gems is here. Let's go, Your Majesty. We've finished the first floor. Next, it's time to go to the second floor. Under Grey's lead, King Landhar III and Hone left the courtyard on the first floor reluctantly. One of them was the kingdom's general, while the other was the supreme ruler and held countless riches. However, they were still surprised by the scene in front of them. It was precisely because they were in high positions that they knew that some things could not be bought with wealth, and those things were more attractive to them than ordinary people. Entering the second floor, King Landhar III and Hone realized that the courtyard had been designed to look metal-like. On the metal floor, some towers reflected cold light. The sound of forging came from the towers as if someone was polishing weapons. After entering that place, the temperature instantly rose by more than one level, and there were weapons stuck in the towers. Those are platinum-tier weapons? 100, 1,000, 10,000. How many weapons are there? When Hone saw the cold weapons on the tower, his expression changed. As a general, he had a deep understanding of weaponry, so he could tell at a glance those were platinum-tier weapons. No fewer than 10,000 tower-shaped buildings were standing in the courtyard, which proved that there were more than 10,000 weapons. How did they get 10,000 platinum-tier weapons? There were only 10 platinum-tier weapons in the entire kingdom, and the king treated each of those like treasure. However, there were 10,000 of them there, which was 1,000 times more than what the kingdom had. Furthermore, it seemed like those platinum-tier weapons were not crudely made. Each of them emitted a strength that was strong enough to distort space. They were no weaker than the so-called strongest offensive weapon in the kingdom, the sky-severing blade. Even their styles were very similar. Your Majesty, those are also weapons that the Black Emperor created using his own abilities. It was modeled after the kingdom's strongest offensive weapon, the sky-severing blade. Of course, these platinum-tier weapons are not inferior to that sword in the slightest. In fact, their hardness and sharpness are even greater than that sword. Count Grey explained the situation to King Landhar III before flying to a higher level. Next is the third level. The real wealth of the severed fingers is stored here. I hope that you will be mentally prepared so that you won't be frightened later. The 100,000 sun fruits, moon gems, and more than 10,000 platinum weapons were already shocking enough. There was something even more surprising than that? Taking a deep breath, Hone subconsciously glanced at the king beside him. That unfathomable ruler had been expressionless since the beginning. No one knew what he was thinking, and he was nervously guessing King Landhar III's thoughts. Hone and the others finally arrived on the third floor. The moment they entered, the three of them were blinded by the golden light. The light did not come from the sunlight in the sky but the reflection of countless gold coins. The entire third floor of the courtyard seemed to be made of gold, and there was nothing on the ground. There was only a mountain of coins piled up. It was hard to imagine hundreds of billions of gold coins or even trillions of gold coins. For King Landhar III and Hone, wealth was not enough to arouse their interest because they both held great wealth, but there was too much wealth in front of them. It turned out that when there was a certain amount of money, it could also impact those in high positions, and the impact was far more significant than other things. Hone, help me. King Landhar III, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly extended his right hand. It seemed like he could not hold himself up in front of so many gold coins. Hone, who was beside him, did not help the king up. Instead, he revealed a bitter smile. Your Majesty, I am very sorry. I do not have the strength to help you up. Hone's legs were trembling. If it were not for the fact that he had been a general for many years and had a superior mind, he would have already fallen to the ground in shock. The amount of gold coins stored here is 1 trillion, which is the group's entire wealth. With this amount of money, even if the kingdom suffers from continuous famine and other natural disasters, or if the kingdom's production is reduced by several times, or even if we do not receive sufficient tax revenue, this amount will be enough to support the expenditure of a kingdom for hundreds of years, Count Grey said in a calm tone. 1 trillion gold coins. The total wealth of the entire kingdom was only a few billion, and those gold coins could support the operation of tens of thousands of kingdoms similar to the Holy Dragon Kingdom. One could imagine how terrifying that number was. Grey, why did you bring me here? King Landhar III asked Grey after he snapped back to his senses. Your Majesty, I want to say that if you give up on pursuing us, then at least half of the money and supplies will be yours. That is the Black Emperor's words. Quote, if I kill all of you now, everything here will be mine. Your Majesty, that is no different from killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. These are just the things that we have obtained after the Black Emperor reorganized the Severed Fingers Gang. If we are given time, the resources that we will receive will be 10 times more than these. Count Grey did not panic. He said, if your Majesty still wants to kill us after knowing this, then I have no complaints. However, I have to remind your Majesty that it will be of no use even if you kill us because the one who brought about all these changes is the Black Emperor. As long as the Black Emperor doesn't die, he can build another Severed Fingers Gang anywhere. Grey, Are you threatening me? What are you thinking? Do you really think that that wealth will make me yield and let you off? Then you are wrong. Hone, kill Gray. Yes, your majesty. After hesitating for a moment, Hone still respectfully agreed. Initially, when Gray had said that he wanted to give more than half of the things there to the king, Hone was moved. The king would definitely not be able to squander so many of those things. When the time came, even if it were just a fraction of the wealth, it would be more than he could enjoy in a few lifetimes. Who would have thought that His Majesty would resist such a temptation and still wanted to kill Gray? He wanted to placate the king, but after thinking about it, he still swallowed what he wanted to say. He knew the king well. Once he made his decision, it would not be easily changed. Forcefully changing the will of the king would only bring death. Hone sighed inwardly and extended his right hand toward Gray. The earth elements in the air spontaneously condensed and quickly turned into a 10-meter large rock palm. Each finger was imbued with a complex color. It gathered and locked onto Gray with a loud cracking sound as if a giant was about to squish a mosquito to death. Count Gray, this is His Majesty's order. I can only apologize to you. Just as Hone's attack was about to crush Gray into a cloud of blood mist, a loud bang was heard. With a muffled sound, the giant rock arm that Hone had summoned instantly shattered. In its place, a tender figure appeared in front of Count Gray. The man wore a simple white robe and only pressed down slightly in front of him. The aura emitted from his body caused the rock arm to disintegrate. General Hone, it's not appropriate to attack someone else's subordinate just because of a disagreement, right? It's you, Watson. Hone's expression changed drastically while staring at the youth in front of him and hearing that familiar tender voice. He suddenly took 2 steps backward, and his mind automatically recalled what had happened in the Campbell family a week ago. The scene of that youth's sword striking down and not a single person in the entire area being able to stand was still fresh in his mind, causing his legs to begin to tremble subconsciously. That's right, it's me. Watson nodded casually, his gaze landing on King Landhar III. After exchanging a glance with the king, Watson revealed a bashful smile. Your Majesty, it's been a long time. Watson, why are you here? Are you related to the severed fingers? I was just about to destroy the underground force that endangers the kingdom. If you are related to those people, even if you are Antonio and Reed's disciple, I have no choice but to kill you. King Landhar III spoke in a stern tone. Facing his threat, Watson only sneered. Your Majesty, since I dared to appear here, I'm not afraid of being killed. What do you have to kill me? Just General Hone? Watson's words had a hint of mockery, which made Hone somewhat dissatisfied but unable to refute. If it were anyone else in the kingdom who dared to say such words in front of him, they would have long been smashed into pieces. However, that was Watson. Not only did he not dare to break Watson, but he was also afraid that if he angered him, the young man would turn around and make him kneel. Watson, even if you are powerful, this is our supreme ruler. You have the audacity to be so disrespectful to His Majesty? Are you trying to rebel? Hone's face darkened as he threatened him with words. If I say that I am going to rebel, General Hone, will you help me if I can give you wealth, weapons, and fruits that can increase one's strength? Watson opened his hands and deliberately put on a proud expression. In his heart, he was sighing. When the king contacted Gray, he had used some method to inform him. If the king accepted Gray's proposal, he did not need to sacrifice himself. The Severed Fingers gang had just started. Even though they were quite powerful, it was not enough to contend with the entire kingdom. He needed time. Unfortunately, King Landhar III had rejected Gray's proposal. He had no choice but to go there over personally to negotiate with the king. During that process, he would implement his second plan to try to use the system's ability to fuse him. If King Landhar III was a ruler that was consistent with the rumors and did not have much power, then he could turn him into his puppet and take over the kingdom. Unfortunately, that plan did not succeed. That made Watson vigilant. As expected, King Landhar III is not as weak as he looks. To be able to bestow senior brother Samuel with a Starlight Tier god's remains, how weak can he be? The system fusion was good, but it could not fuse an existence stronger than himself. Fortunately, apart from the first 2 plans, Watson had other preparations. Your Majesty, just now you said that I have a connection with the Severed Fingers gang, but it is actually not accurate. Rather than saying that I have a connection with the severed fingers, it would be better to say that they are my product. Stop pretending. I have laid my cards on the table. I am the Black Emperor. Watson's voice reverberated in the courtyard. Watson, what did you say? You are the Black Emperor. Are you kidding? Hone's eyes widened in disbelief. Previously, he and the king had guessed that Watson was the person who had reorganized the Severed Fingers gang. However, when Watson admitted that he was the Black Emperor, he could not believe it. Who would dare to directly claim that they were any kind of emperor in front of the king? Was he not setting himself up for death? As expected, Hone noticed that after Watson's voice fell, King Landhar III narrowed his eyes. A cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. Watson, are you challenging me? Of course not, Your Majesty. I'm not stupid enough to challenge the ruler of a kingdom. I'm not here to belittle you, Your Majesty, but to make a deal with you. I sincerely invite you to join the Severed Fingers Gang and become our new member. We will become the Severed Fingers Gang's 2 leaders. Quote, what? It was not just Hone. Even Gray, who was loyal to Watson, grew anxious when he heard Watson's suggestion. His scalp went numb. To ask a dignified ruler of a kingdom to join the Severed Fingers Gang, that could no longer be described as audacity, but madness. If they were the king, they would probably have to kill him 100 times to vent their hatred. However, contrary to their expectations, after hearing Watson's thoughts, not only was King Landhar III not angry, he even showed signs that he was interested. Joining Severed Fingers and ruling those people with you? What makes you think that I will agree to your request and sit on the same level as you? There's no need to sit on the same level with me. After you join us, I can listen to your commands. You only need to join us, Watson replied casually, the corners of his mouth curling upward. As for the reason? Well, there are a few, but none of them are important. Let's talk about my conditions first. I hope that after you joins us, you won't come here and test me again. Those words made Hone even more surprised. Before mentioning the reason, he had mentioned his own request first. Watson was probably not really crazy. Initially, Watson had listed out all the benefits, but even then, King Landhar III might disagree. Then, the young man had made an even worse request. Watson stretched his fingers outward. Then, dazzling lines flew from his finger and intertwined in the air, turning into a majestic divine kingdom in the shape of a giant sword. The walls around the divine kingdom were filled with sword aura, and the bright light illuminated the entire 8th-tier sky courtyard. Sword St. Reed's specialty, the Kingdom of the Sword, displayed its full power at that moment. Plop! With a muffled sound, Gray and Hone could not withstand the pressure and knelt on the ground. Only Watson and King Landhar III could stand where they were. A layer of light of faith appeared on King Landhar III's body. Without any movement, he isolated the power of the divine kingdom. Interesting. Within a few days of becoming Reed's disciple, you've advanced to such a level. You can even use the divine kingdom. It's hard to imagine what it will be like when you advance to the Starlight tier. No one in the entire kingdom, no, the entire world can control you, right? But I'm not at Starlight tier yet. Your Majesty still has many ways to control me, right? Watson and King Landhar III answered each other's questions, making the people around them confused. Watson, you are an interesting guy, indeed. I apologize for the meaningless probing I did before this. No wonder Reed and Antonio, who have such high standards, would fight to have you as their disciple at the same time. I also feel a little interested in you. I agree with your proposal. I can join Severed Fingers and help you govern that group. In return, you will sign a contract with me. You must swear on your soul that you will never betray me. Can you do that? As your Majesty wishes, Watson simply replied and extended his finger above his head. I, Watson, swear on my soul that from now on, I will become the king's friend. I will definitely complete my mission for the king, and at the same time, I will never betray him. Along with the oath, a pale pattern formed by a layer of soul aura appeared on Watson's body. Even if Watson had advanced to the Starlight or even higher level, he would not be able to break the oath he had made at that moment. Otherwise, his soul would collapse and be burned into dregs by the soul flames. Your Majesty, do you have any other requests? No. Gazing deeply at Watson, King Landhar III suddenly revealed a smile. There is a banquet in the palace tonight. It will start at around 6 o'clock. When that time comes, you can come over. After the banquet ends, I have something to tell you in private. Yes, Your Majesty, Watson said. Since you have joined the Severed Fingers gang, Your Majesty, please let me announce this exciting news to everyone. Your Majesty should not have any doubts, right? Of course. After confirming that King Landhar III had agreed, Watson opened his mouth and used his combat aura to announce the news of King Landhar III joining the Severed Fingers. His voice resounded throughout the 8-layered courtyard, and all the members of the Severed Fingers heard it clearly. The king has joined the Severed Fingers gang and become the other leader. Is that true? A member of the Severed Fingers gang was transporting goods when he heard Watson's voice from the sky. He suddenly froze on the spot, and the goods in his hands fell to the ground without him realizing it. The other Severed Fingers gang members were also looking at the sky in shock, their eyes wide open. Watson called himself the Black Emperor. They had initially thought that Watson would go against King Landhar III, which was why he had come up with such a name. What kind of operation was that? The Black Emperor is too strong. Long live the Severed Fingers gang. Long live the Black Emperor. Oh, right, now we have to add another. Long live His Majesty. For a moment, the members of the Severed Fingers gang who had come to their senses knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the sky. There was a mixture of respect and excitement on their faces. The fact that His Majesty had become a member of the Severed Fingers gang was no small matter. In other words, not only was the future Severed Fingers not an underground force that everyone wanted to beat up, but it had also gone from an underground force to an official force under the king. In other words, no matter what they did in the future, they would no longer have any scruples. Accompanied by the crowd's cheers, King Landhar III brought Hone to the courtyard entrance and nodded at everyone who saluted. Seeing that Watson was not lying, the king gestured to everyone in an elegant and easygoing manner. It was apparent that he had become their leader. Their expressions became more and more excited. Thank you, Your Majesty, for being willing to let go of the Severed Fingers gang and become our leader. Your Majesty is wise. We will definitely follow Your Majesty's orders in the future. Standing in front of the courtyard gate, King Landhar III ignored the compliments. He only looked back, and his gaze fell on the young boy in the sky. Watson, don't forget to come to my palace at 6 o'clock in the evening to attend the banquet. Also, my banquet will use those sun and moon gems of yours. When the time comes, don't forget to bring some over. Also, don't forget to leave those gold coins on the 3rd floor. Leave enough for your use. Then, move the rest to my palace tonight. Quote. Then, the king left Count Grey's manor with Hone. Standing on the street and looking back, King Landhar III found that the courtyard behind him had suddenly become the same as before. The majestic 8-story courtyard had disappeared entirely. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth twitched as if he had seen something funny and laughed. Your Majesty, what is so funny? Hone asked gloomily. Just now, because Watson had used the Kingdom of the Sword, he had to kneel again. That was the second time he had knelt in front of Watson, especially in front of King Landhar III, which made him feel very embarrassed. In addition, he also felt strange that King Landhar III had agreed to Watson's request. King Landhar III had not wavered in the face of such a degree of temptation before, but after Watson appeared, he had a change of attitude, and he had agreed to join the Severed Fingers. No one would believe it. Hone, do you not understand why I agreed to Watson's request just now? After a few minutes, King Landhar III had had enough of laughing. He rubbed the tears at the corner of his eyes and asked. Hone nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. I don't understand. That is where you are lacking. Although there aren't many people in the kingdom who can defeat you as one of the best among the kingdom's elites, you are far too lacking when it comes to intelligence and strategy. The reason why I agreed to Watson's request was because that youth had seen through all of my thoughts from the start. I did not want to agree, but I had no choice but to do it. King Landhar III's explanation made Hone even more confused. What did he mean he had to agree? Did Watson use some kind of method to force the king? However, no matter how he looked at Watson's actions just now, there was no hint of coercion. On the contrary, Watson took the initiative to show weakness to King Landhar III and even signed a contract saying that he would never betray the king. Hone, you still don't understand. In this case, I'll explain it a little more clearly. Do you know why I didn't agree to Grey's request? It's because I don't allow anything to exceed my control. Regardless of whether it's over $1 trillion in wealth, or precious sun and moon gems, or platinum tier items, I'd rather not have those. I don't allow anyone to use those things to escape from my control. Therefore, the Severed Fingers gang must be destroyed. Then why did you change your mind? Because Watson threatened me. Do you know why I chose to go along with Watson's bad attitude toward me? Before that, I had sent people to investigate Watson and did some things in secret. You are also aware of those things. It seems like Watson was dissatisfied with me after he found out about that. It's no wonder. I think he must have been dissatisfied with me ever since I destroyed the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. As King Landhar III spoke, he seemed to be immersed in some kind of memory. After a moment, his eyes became intense. First, he showed his hostility toward me. Then, he showed me his power. That power to create platinum-tier weapons and that majestic courtyard in the sky, as well as Watson's own strength. He is only 12 or 13 years old, but he could already use the Divine Kingdom. In the entire kingdom, the only person who could rival him was Sword Saint Reed, and Reed happened to be his master. Even if Reed is Watson's master, the two of them together are not a match for the entire kingdom. Hone still looked confused. Yes, even if they work together, as long as I mobilize all of my strength, I can still kill them. However, after losing the Sword Saint, the surrounding kingdoms will take the opportunity to invade us. That will break the plan that I had previously made. Of course, that was only one aspect. More importantly, Watson had given me a choice. Should I make him submit while he was still unable to fight against the kingdom, or should I wait until he entered the Starlight tier and accept his revenge? What do you think I should do? Watson's strength was deceptive. Although he was powerful, he was still unable to contend against the entire kingdom. However, if Watson took another step forward and became a Starlight tier, he would become a god on land. There would be a fundamental difference between him and humans. The kingdom would not be able to do anything to him. At that time, Watson would not need to negotiate with the king at all. If King Landhar III did not agree to what he wanted to do, he could kill him with a wave of his hand. He could even destroy the entire kingdom. He would not choose not to make Watson submit. Instead, he would destroy Watson and the Severed Fingers gang. That was because with Watson's strength, even though he was no match for the kingdom, as long as he wanted to escape, no one would be able to catch him. At the very least, Hone did not have the confidence to catch Watson. If they could not catch Watson, the only thing they could do was to kill Watson's family and friends. Doing so would only aggravate Watson and cause him to fall into a vicious cycle. The Holy Dragon Kingdom was not the only country in the world. Watson could escape to the Winter Nation, which had a grudge against the kingdom, or enter the Forest of Eternity and return to the kingdom for revenge after becoming a Starlight tier elite. Just thinking about that scene made Hone feel terrified. Get Watson to surrender? No, it doesn't seem possible to make other choices. It seems like accepting Watson's proposal is the best way, Hone said helplessly, scratching his head. Yes, I would prefer to make Watson surrender, but I was forced to accept his conditions instead. Now you understand why I said Watson is an interesting young man, right? He is a teenager, but he can strategize to such an extent, scheming against me step by step. Although it might be due to his strength, it is also related to his intelligence. On the one hand, I am terrified that such a teenager has appeared in front of me, but at the same time, I feel lucky that such a genius is a citizen of our kingdom. King Landhar III raised his head and stared at the clouds floating in the sky. He sighed deeply. Chapter 414. Taste the joy of remaining together. Phew. After King Landhar III left the 8-story courtyard in the sky, Watson heaved a sigh of relief. He's finally gone. I thought that if he did not agree to my final request, I would have no choice but to fight him head-on. I would have fused all the armies in the capital to fight him. Fortunately, he did not force me to such an extent. If the other party were not an extremely vicious person, Watson would not take the initiative to fuse him. At the same time, King Landhar III had tools that could allow people to advance to Starlight tier. If there were many such tools, King Landhar III could distribute them to many people. Then, it was still uncertain who would win or lose. Watson had no choice but to take a gamble. He bet that King Landhar III would not take a huge risk to fight him. Fortunately, he made the right bet. He had managed to gain King Landhar's trust to a certain extent. As for the oath he had made, it was just for show. The effect of the soul oath was absolutely powerful, and there was no doubt about it. However, Watson could use the system fusion to fuse the oath he had once put down with the other oaths and make changes to them. That was his trump card. It's all the higher-ups' fault. If they didn't try to please me and do everything they could to make me stand out, King Landhar III wouldn't have found me so early. Watson bit his finger as his gaze fell on Count Grey, who had been kneeling in the air. Grey, call all the high-ups to the meeting room. I have something to say to all of you. Yes, Black Emperor. Count Grey respectfully agreed and turned to call his other fellow leaders. In a short while, Watson sat at the head of the table in the meeting room used for daily meetings. In front of him were the 10 Severed Fingers gang's higher-ups. Watson did not sit alone in the middle of the 2 rows of chairs. He added chairs beside him, one on the left and one on the right. Watson chose to sit closer to the left. In the face of Watson's serious expression, all the higher-ups were silent. They did not dare to speak loudly. Only Basher muttered softly after seeing the chair beside Watson. I heard that the king has just arrived here and has become a member of our gang. The Black Emperor has pulled the kingdom's dignified ruler into our camp. Isn't he strong? Help. As soon as Basher finished speaking, Watson raised his hand and slammed it on the table. Everyone was shocked. You idiots. Do you know how foolishly you acted during the day? Even though the Severed Fingers gang has become a force on the surface, everything still needs to be kept secret. You dared to brazenly appear in front of me and lure King Landhar III here. Initially, I planned to wait for the Severed Fingers gang to develop to a certain extent before spending the 100 trillion gold coins to buy a large amount of the kingdom's products, including crops and some essential daily necessities. Then, I would use the economy to control the kingdom. That way, even if His Majesty knew what we did, he wouldn't lay his hands on us that easily. In addition, after the establishment of the intelligence network, we would use that money to inject it into the other regions of the kingdom and control the resources of the entire kingdom. Every year, we pay taxes that far exceed what we used to pay to the kingdom. That would make it even more impossible for the king to lay his hands on us. Instead, he would treat us as treasures, he yelled angrily. His original plan was to use the economy to control the kingdom. It was not difficult for him, who had unlimited wealth, to achieve that as long as he controlled the kingdom's economy. Under such circumstances, if the king wanted to attack him, the kingdom would face the danger of economic collapse. Countless people would starve to death because they could not eat, and hunger would lead to riots and looting that would indirectly cause the kingdom's collapse. When the Dragonspine Snow Mountain collapsed, and the Holy Dragon Kingdom's defensive line against the Winter Nation had disappeared, the Holy Dragon Kingdom was in turmoil. Everyone thought that the Winter Nation and other nearby kingdoms would invade the Holy Dragon Kingdom. If the kingdom were in danger, he believed that King Landhar III, who valued profit above all else, would not kill him even if he wanted to. However, King Landhar III had appeared way too early, and Watson had no choice but to change his plan. Instead of relying on a threat toward the kingdom, he had to rely on himself. King Landhar III would not kill him, and killing his family and friends would only make him furious. Furthermore, the king would not be assured of the power he had if he did not kill him. Therefore, Watson could only hand the resources he had obtained and pretend to be King Landhar's ally. Black Emperor, please don't be angry. It's all Veronica's fault. If she hadn't insisted on dressing up to please you, we wouldn't have gone along with her. Basher swallowed his saliva. Obviously, he was frightened by the furious Watson. Basher, you're pushing the blame onto me? You have the nerve to blame me? Yes, I dressed up to meet the Black Emperor, but I did not kill a dragon. The reason King Landhar III found this place so quickly was that you caused the kingdom to lose a huge dragon. Veronica did not want to be outdone by Basher's rebuke, which made Basher look embarrassed. His voice weakened. How would I know that dragon was from the Dragon Knights? No name was written on it. Basher, that's what you always do. Once you get complacent, you forget everything and lack common sense. If someone should take responsibility for this matter, it must be you, Veronica said. Basher's expression darkened. Veronica did not stop talking until Basher could no longer raise his head. Other than Basher, the other person responsible is Klein. He was the one who suggested that all of us meet with the Black Emperor, and he gave everyone 10 minutes to think of a way to make the Black Emperor happy. If it weren't for Klein, everyone wouldn't have appeared around the Holy Dragon Tavern together, much less compete, resulting in such a huge mess. If it weren't for that, I would be enjoying a leisurely afternoon date with the Black Emperor. Veronica, according to what you said, the rest of us can't be with the Black Emperor. Only you can be with him? What kind of logic is that? If it were up to me, I wouldn't blame others. Everyone here is responsible for this matter. Your responsibility is greater than others, Elvin said. Stop arguing. What's the point of saying that now? Think about what you'll do in the future. We became the leaders of the underground forces because we hated the kingdom and the king. Now that the king has joined the Severed Fingers gang, it's better for us to die than to listen to the king's orders. Aemon interrupted the quarrel with a frown. As the leaders of the underground forces, they were mostly hooligans or orphans who had climbed up step by step. Therefore, they were used to seeing the dark side of the kingdom and did not have a good impression of the king. On the contrary, a leader like Watson, who used his strength to conquer them, was more aligned with their aesthetic standards. If it doesn't work out, then let's fight it out with the king. The Black Emperor has a potion that can allow people to advance to the Platinum tier, and he can even create Starlight tier weapons and armor. With those things, we must be able to defeat the king's army? Basher waved his fists, his face was fierce. Basher, I just said a few words to you, and you've gotten complacent again. Do you think that the kingdom is so easy to defeat? The Imperial Guards in the capital are at least 100,000 men strong. Furthermore, if we can't eliminate those troops quickly, the entire kingdom will send more troops to surround us. At that time, we won't be able to escape even if we want to. We'll just be sitting ducks. Furthermore, it's not like the kingdom doesn't have any Platinum tier elites. Some families even have a large number of Diamond tier holy relics. Although they're not Starlight tier, they're enough to deal with us. Veronica is right. The exact strength of the kingdom is unknown. In addition, the king is an unfathomable person. The chances of us losing the war is even higher. In any case, I've already sworn allegiance to the king. He won't make a move against us for a short period of time. Now, we only need to deal with matters that the king has given us. At the same time, we just need to do what I've previously arranged. Watson tapped the table with his finger. Black Emperor, is that all right? At that moment, Klein, who had been silent all that while, said, since the king has already joined us, it's impossible to eliminate him. However, we can start the meeting in secret at another stronghold. For example, we can use that place as a stronghold for the meeting. If there's anything that we don't want the king to know, we can go somewhere else instead. That's a good idea. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard Klein's suggestion. Klein, your thinking is too simple. First of all, the king has spies all over the kingdom. If we go somewhere else discreetly, he'll know about it eventually. Under such circumstances, even if I don't trigger the punishment of the soul contract, the king will still suspect me. I've already betrayed him, but I'm not being punished. That will cause the king not to trust us. Secondly, even if we can avoid the king's spies, you should not remember the content of our conversation. The king might summon you to the palace and use magic to probe your memories. I know of several types of magic that can probe people's memories. There are even a few types of enchantment magic that can turn those who are affected into puppets that can be manipulated. In conclusion, there's no need to change the venue for discussion. Our original plan is the same regardless of whether or not the king joins us. But now that he has, we'll only be taking a portion of the profits we earn. There's no need to worry about that. Watson looked at everyone as he rejected Klein's idea. After he said that, everyone fell into deep thought before they sighed and said, yes, Black Emperor. After this incident, all of you should have more or less learned your lesson. You should know that even if you have the strength, you should keep a low profile. Furthermore, all of you don't have much strength at the moment. From the next meeting onward, the king will join us. When the time comes, even if you have any ulterior motives, you should hide them well. I won't be able to save you if the king decides to kill you. Do you understand? Watson used his combat aura to ask the last sentence. His voice reverberated in the room. The vibrating air buzzed, and a terrifying aura spread from his body without any concealment. It terrified the higher-ups. Were they ashamed? They had only wanted to perform well in front of Watson. They did not expect to put Watson in such a difficult position. They were too useless. Just as everyone thought that, Watson suddenly stood up. He smiled and said, I've already said what I should to reprimand you. I believe that you won't do it again in the future. There's one more thing I must say. The red wine and the sun and moon gems that Count Grey prepared for me made my friends very happy after eating them. The dragon meat that Basher cooked was also very delicious. Thank you for making those for me. Black Emperor, you flatter us. It's our fortune to be able to make you feel happy. Count Grey and Basher did not expect Watson to praise them after the meeting ended. They raised their heads in trepidation and hurriedly said, "Thank you, Black Emperor." Watson said, "It's not just you guys. The quiz that Klein set up motivated everyone to deposit money in our bank, and it also made me famous. You're really thoughtful. There's also Marcus. You must have spent a lot of money to get me that diamond tier relic." Watson turned his head to glance at the others. Klein and Marcus had awkward looks on their faces as they scratched their heads in embarrassment. "Lord Black Emperor, you flatter us. We did not do such a great thing." Finally, Veronica, although you rushed into the private room dressed like that and asked for my autograph, which made the atmosphere very stiff, that outfit suits you well, and I'm pleased to have fans who worship me. I just hope that your acting skills will be more natural next time. As for the rest of you, whether you've prepared something or not, or if you haven't prepared a surprise, I'm grateful for your kindness and thank you for them too. Watson placed his hand on his shoulder and bowed to everyone there. His actions stunned everyone in the room. Then, they pursed their lips tightly, and their eyes became moist. They had not expected to cause so much trouble for Watson. Watson did not criticize them, and he also thanked them warmly. They felt as if they could cry. The rewards and punishments were clear, and he would not vent his anger on his subordinates. What a gentle superior he was. "Basher, you're really something. A grown man is actually shedding tears. How embarrassing." Veronica glanced at Basher and snorted disdainfully. "DMN it, Veronica. Don't say those useless things to me. I have sand in my eyes, understand? DMN it, the wind in the conference room today is too strong." The meeting room was calm, and there was not a hint of wind at all. Basher rubbed his eyes as he said that the corners of his eyes were red. As the leader of the Severed Fingers, he could not have gotten to where he was today without his own hard work. Before he became the upper echelon of the Severed Fingers, he was just a small hooligan. He had no family in the king's city. Every day, he would either beat people half to death or be beaten half to death. No higher-ups had ever been so concerned about him, not even once. Veronica, who was laughing at Basher, was not doing much better herself. Tears welled in her bright and beautiful eyes. She knew that beauty was a weapon. Even though Watson had given her many benefits and was a generous and promising higher-up, she still could not help but want to use her weapon to attack Watson in exchange for more benefits. Originally, in her opinion, Watson was no different from those higher-ups with severed fingers that she had accompanied before. It was just that the former would look at her with a vicious gaze when he saw her, wishing that he could strip her of her clothes on the spot, while the latter pretended to be reserved. Every time they looked at her, their eyes were clear. However, as long as they were in bed, it was not only the wolf with a fierce look, but also the meek sheep. In the end, they were all the same. Veronica had once thought so, but now she suddenly felt how stupid that idea was. Watson was different from the people she had met before. Watson's actions at that moment proved how special he was. Not only were Veronica and Basher, but the Severed Fingers upper echelons present were more or less moved. Some of them had submitted to Watson from their hearts, while others were forced by Watson's strength. As for now, their sincerity has taken up the majority. That's all I have to say. I hope that the members of the Severed Fingers will continue to work hard and make the Severed Fingers better and better. Black Emperor, please rest assured. We will definitely not let you down. After cheering everyone on, Watson flashed and used teleportation to disappear on the spot. Many of the higher-ups of the Severed Fingers gang waited for Watson to leave for a long time. Their expressions were still somewhat excited. DMN it, I actually added so much trouble to the Black Emperor this time. I feel so guilty. From now onward, I must redouble my efforts to make up for it. As for the king, don't even think of making me work for him obediently. The other people in the capital may be in awe of the king, but I'm not afraid of him. Since he was young, because he had no parents, Basher had suffered a lot. Such a kingdom did not do anything to make up for it. The kingdom would only open its doors to the nobleman. For a guy like him who came from the slums, the kingdom did not even treat them as human beings. Even if the noblemen killed people in the slums, as long as they paid a bribe, they would be released from prison without a crime. If the people in the slums killed people, what awaited them would be cruel torture that they could not do even if they wanted to die. He realized that the world was unfair, so Bashir had always been sure that his life creed, "the truth was the only strength," was correct. Watson was undoubtedly the strongest person he had ever met. Such a strong person was also gentle, which made him curious about how Watson did it. A strong person should coldly give orders and use weak people as stepping stones. How ridiculous it sounded to be gentle and strong. If one could not be cold and heartless, a strong person would also have weaknesses. But Watson's gentle words just now had deeply touched his heart. He clearly felt like gentleness had no meaning, and only cruelty was the truth. Why did he feel that what he had done was not in vain when Watson thanked him? What about the satisfaction of giving everything in return? Bashir did not know what kind of feelings he had for Watson, but he knew that he would work for Watson for the rest of his life and would not have any complaints. There would not be another person in the world who would give him such a feeling. Bashir, don't say such things. Just do what the king wants you to do. For example, let us kill whoever we want to kill. Otherwise, we will cause trouble for the Black Emperor. But following Bashir, Aemon also opened his mouth. He clenched his fists tightly as he spoke, while clenching his teeth and hammering his fists on the table. But even if you expect me to be loyal to the king and treat him as one of our leaders, I can't do it. This time, it's all our fault. As subordinates, we brought disaster to our superiors. How humiliating is that? I must prove to the Black Emperor that it was not a wrong decision for him to choose us as his subordinates. Well said, let us work together to prove it to the Black Emperor. Quote, everyone nodded in agreement to Amon's words and the awareness contained in his words. Flames burned in their eyes. King Landhar III had joined the Severed Fingers temporarily. The Severed Fingers would always be Watson's. The past, the future, and certainly the future. I'm going to the palace to attend a banquet at 6 in the evening. I wonder what His Majesty is going to say to me. I hope it's not something I don't want to hear. Watson was currently on his way back to the Sword Saint's courtyard, muttering to himself. When he had just left Count Grey's manor, he had specifically instructed the members responsible for transporting the Severed Fingers to transport the gold coins, a portion of the sun and moon gems, and a platinum tier item to the palace. Actually, it's not without benefits to have King Landhar III join the Severed Fingers gang. First, with the help of King Landhar III, no matter how big the business of the Severed Fingers gang is, no noble would dare to make things difficult for it. The sun and moon wine that the Severed Fingers gang had just launched into the market had not made much profit yet. After all, there was more than one wine merchant in the kingdom. If the wine monopolized the market too much, and the wine could not be replicated, it was hard to guarantee that other people would not unite and suppress their trade. It was the same with the platinum tier weapons. Therefore, that problem would not exist since King Landhar III had joined them. After all, no matter how powerful the kingdom's noblemen were, even the 3 archduke families would not dare to oppose the king, would they? Other than that, there is another benefit to having the king join the Severed Fingers gang. Once the king is familiar with the Severed Fingers gang, he will understand how convenient it is to do things with the Severed Fingers gang. That way, when the king gives the order to the Severed Fingers, I will also be able to know what orders His Majesty has given. It is equivalent to me opening up the resources in my hands to the king, and at the same time, the king will also hand over a portion of the information to me in a transparent manner. Watson rubbed his chin, thinking about what he should do next. Now, I can only decide what to do next after the banquet tonight is over and what His Majesty wants to say to me. It seems that I can only wait until tonight to make a decision. After all, that was the first time I had attended a banquet hosted by the king. In order to not lose any respect for my 2 masters, I'd better make a decent set of clothes. With that thought in mind, he turned around and walked toward the direction of the clothing store. He decided to buy a few cheap gowns from the clothing store and go back to fuse them into a decent set of clothes. Perhaps it was because he was looking forward to it, but time passed very quickly. In the afternoon, Watson was wearing a platinum gown and standing in front of the palace gate. Beside him were Antonio, Reed, and Christina. Antonio and Reed were both in formal wear, while Christina was wearing a red gown. Her chest was very low, revealing half of her body. Her slender arms gently rested on Watson's hands. Combined with her yellow hair and pink face, she looked very attractive. The banquet organized by King Landhar III was naturally grand. Other than Watson, all the other ministers and nobles in the capital were invited. At that moment, those people came down from the gorgeous carriages and were discussing the purpose of the king's banquet animatedly at that time. Watson, when you enter the banquet later, try not to speak carelessly. Master Antonio and I will handle everything. I don't know why His Majesty has specifically asked Watson to attend the banquet at this time. Don't let Watson perform a great battle against the unicorn like before. Reed and Antonio were different from the excited nobles around them. They appeared a little anxious. Just a few hours ago, Watson had brought dozens of sets of clothes home and fused them into platinum-tier gowns. He also told them that His Majesty the King was inviting them to a banquet in the evening and specifically asked them to go over. Not long after he told them about that matter, the Sword Saint's courtyard received an invitation from the king. The joy they felt had cooled because of the king's invitation, especially Reed. If Antonio had not told him about the conflict between Watson and the king, he might have felt happy about that invitation. However, at that moment, he could only worry. He did not know what His Majesty had prepared to deal with Watson. A genius like Watson could change the situation of the world as long as he was alive. He would not let Watson die so early. After all, he had already placed all his hopes for the future on Watson, just like Antonio. Watson thought that his two masters did not look right, so he comforted them. Masters, why are you so sad at the banquet? Is there something troubling you? He did not tell the two masters that he had grasped the severed fingers and reached an agreement with His Majesty because the fewer people who knew about that, the safer it would be. Furthermore, the two masters might go to His Majesty and argue with him. He did not want the two masters to worry about him. Watson, we're concerned about your situation. Reed smiled bitterly. Worrying about my matter? Is there anything that I am worth worrying for? Watson, you don't have to listen to Reed's nonsense. I think what he is worried about is how to get more holy relics so that you can help him fuse them. Antonio coughed, giving Reed a warning look. As for how to help Watson, after Antonio told Reed about Watson's target, the two of them had discussed that issue. In the end, the two of them concluded that they had to help in secret and not let Watson know. On the one hand, Watson was still too young, so the burden of rebellion would be left to the two old guys. On the other hand, they also hoped that in the future, when Watson lacked power, they would put the accumulated power in front of Watson and shock him. Sensing Antonio's gaze, Reed wanted to say something, but he held it back. Father, Master Antonio, the banquet is about to begin. Let's go in. Christina did not notice the abnormality between her father and Antonio. After looking around, she said calmly, ever since I obtained power from Watson, I can barely use the kingdom of the sword now. Her temperament was completely different from before. She was filled with a strong sense of tranquility, and everything she looked at was dull. Sometimes, it was not a good thing to get overly powerful too easily. At least, Christina was like that. She had completely lost the desire to continue becoming stronger, and all of that was thanks to Watson. Let's go. Without saying anything else, the few of them blended into the crowd of nobles and walked into the palace. Because of Antonio and Reed's fame, even among the hundreds of nobles, they still stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, after a while, someone came up to the two of them and complimented them. I did not expect the astrologer and the sword saint to attend the banquet at the same time. We are really honored. After all, the two of you are usually not interested in such things. This must be Watson. I heard that his talent is higher than that of all the young masters of the noble families in the capital. Now, it seems that that young man is indeed a talented person with an extraordinary bearing. I have a daughter at home about the same age as Watson and has also joined the Royal Academy's warrior department. Maybe we can even let them get closer to each other? Some people praised Antonio and Reed, while others wanted to break through to Watson. They had experienced that kind of scene many times. While Watson put on an aloof look, his gaze had been locked on the deepest hall, searching for the Emperor's figure. Soon, he saw the Emperor and Hone walk out of the hall as if they were also looking for him. King Landhar III's gaze swept across the crowd. After meeting him, he revealed a satisfied expression, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Hone, who was walking through the hall, also looked over with a strange gaze. At that moment, Watson felt a third gaze on him, and he subconsciously turned his head. Only then did he realize that, a little girl standing beside Hone. She was about 11 or 12 years old, and her golden hair was braided into two ponytails that hung down to both sides of her body. She wore a white princess dress, and her golden red eyes were diamond-shaped, like the stars. Her gaze was filled with a condescending air. King Landhar III's sense of presence was too strong, and the girl was short, so Watson did not notice that girl before that. However, after seeing her, he found that that girl had a special eye-catching quality that made people unable to avert their eyes. As if she noticed Watson noticing her gaze, the condescending air in the girl's eyes became even stronger. She turned her head and looked elsewhere. That girl is standing next to the king. Is she his daughter? I heard that the king has 3 princes and a princess. That should be the little princess, right? While Watson was guessing in his heart, Christina, who was next to him, also looked in the direction of King Landhar III. When she saw the girl, she said, "I can't believe that even the youngest princess, Princess Kiana, who is known as the Golden Dragon Princess, is here. Everyone knows that the king loves the youngest princess the most. Since she is here, this banquet must be significant to the king." "It is as I expected. She is the youngest princess," Watson muttered in his heart. As for why that princess was looking at him with that kind of gaze just now, he did not quite understand. "Everyone, thank you for coming to attend my banquet despite your busy schedule. This banquet has one purpose, and that is that the Royal Academy will start its semester in a little more than a day. Among the students that the Royal Academy recruited this time, I have heard of many geniuses. For example, Augustus, the genius from the Campbell family. Seeing that most of the noblemen had arrived, King Landhar III had invited everyone into the main hall. He walked toward the high throne in the main hall and sat down. Beside him were the little Princess Kiana and General Hone. King Landhar III looked downward and spoke in a loud voice. His voice was filled with pressure as it spread throughout the main hall. When he mentioned Augustus, he paused. The noblemen turned their heads one after another, and their eyes gathered in the direction of the Campbell family. They saw that the Campbell family was led by Armand, and his 3 children, Newman, McGee, and Freya, were all there. Behind the 3 of them were the younger generation members, Augustus, Lily, and the others. Augustus stepped out of the crowd when the king called out his name. It was not appropriate to say that. To be more precise, he was in a wheelchair and was pushed to the front. Is that Augustus, the one who claims to be the strongest among the Campbell family's younger generation? Why is he in a wheelchair? Quote, when the surrounding people saw Augustus' appearance, they could not help but talk about it. Don't you know? I've heard some rumors. They said that Augustus had a conflict with Watson in the Holy Dragon Tavern. In the end, Watson crippled him and hung him on the signboard. If it weren't for General Hone's timely rescue, Augustus' life might have been in danger. Furthermore, Watson was completely fine after hitting Augustus. I wonder how the Campbell family can endure it. The people who knew about it explained it to the people around them. Although no one dared to say anything about what had happened in the Campbell family, the battle between Watson and Augustus had begun in the Holy Dragon Tavern. As a result, even if the Campbell family ordered people to keep quiet, they could not stop the news from spreading. At that moment, Augustus was sitting in a wheelchair. He felt extremely humiliated when he heard the crown discussing him. He struggled to get up from the wheelchair and said, "Your Majesty." He was not the craziest genius in the kingdom. Since he had his leg broken by Watson, he was more like the most sullen genius in the kingdom. "Augustus, I heard that you haven't been feeling well recently. I will allow you to sit as you pay your respects to me." King Landhar III waved his hand at Augustus, indicating that Augustus did not need to stand up. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Augustus sat back down, facing his head and staying in the middle of the hall. At that moment, King Landhar III continued to call out names. In addition to Augustus of the Campbell family, Nia of the Saint Laurent family is also a rare genius. She had obtained full marks in the Royal Academy's assessment this time. Nia, who was dressed in a long purple dress, stepped out from the Saint Laurent family and came to the center of the hall. She nodded slightly at the king and did not speak. Instead of feeling angry, King Landhar III called out a few more names. A group of young noble boys and girls stepped forward. Those people were all geniuses from prominent noble families. At that moment, All of them felt extremely esteemed, and even their families also felt honored. All of you are young geniuses. In the future, you will become the pillar of the kingdom. I am extremely gratified. Of course, when it comes to pillars of the kingdom, I have to mention one person. That's Watson, who had just arrived in the kingdom and had become Antonio and Reed's disciple. As one of the kingdom's founding fathers, Antonio had been sending outstanding talents to the kingdom. Reed had also worked hard and achieved great merit. Not only had he groomed a few platinum-tier disciples, but his daughter, Christina, had also reached platinum tier. This should be the kingdom's best era in the past few hundred years. Quote, under the praise of King Landhar III, Watson and Christina left their original positions and went to the center of the hall where the geniuses were, enjoying the fervent gazes of the crowd. Watson, I heard that you broke Augustus' legs, did you? I won't stop you from fighting here, because fighting will make you stronger. However, I hope that when the Royal Academy starts, you will put more effort into studying and not fighting. If you insist on fighting, I can give you a fair chance to fight. Yes, Your Majesty, I understand. Watson lowered his head in agreement, and whispers came from all around. Sure enough, Augustus's leg was broken by Watson. The king didn't even blame Watson. He is treating that young man too well. Everyone, I believe that after seeing such a large number of geniuses, you can also feel my gratification. Of course, I don't plan to only let you feel my gratification, but also to experience it. Everyone must be tired after hearing so much. Let's distribute the snacks that I have prepared for all our future pillars. King Landhar III clapped his hands, and a guard immediately walked out from the back of the main hall. He held a huge tray covered with a red cloth in his hand. Under everyone's puzzled gazes, the guard opened the tray in his hand to reveal bright red and white fruits, and a refreshing fragrance instantly filled the entire hall. These are the sun and moon gems. They are produced in the Forest of Eternity in the south, and it took me a lot of effort to get them. If you eat one, you will be able to advance from an ordinary person who knows nothing to a gold-tier elite and awaken your light or dark elemental cultivation talent. I could not bear to consume those fruits. After all, I am already very old, and it is useless for me to cultivate now. Therefore, I decided to give all these fruits to these geniuses. I hope that after you consume these fruits, your strength will improve, and you will be able to bring out more light and heat for the kingdom. Chapter 415. A shocking betrothal. A fruit that can raise one's strength to gold tier. Is that true? Many of the noblemen present were surprised when they heard what King Landhar III had said. As noblemen of the kingdom, they had never heard of such a miraculous fruit. Even if it were a gold tier potion, it would only raise a silver tier elite by a notch, giving them a chance to advance to gold tier. His Majesty said so, how could it be wrong? And I've heard of such a fruit. It does indeed grow on the world tree in the Forest of Eternity in the south. I've been to the Elven Kingdom when I was young. That was what an elderly elf there told me. I don't know about the sun and moon gems, but I know that recently, a wine called the Sun and Moon wine has appeared in many taverns in the kingdom. After drinking that strange wine, one's strength will increase. I wonder if it has something to do with those two fruits? Some were puzzled and some were more familiar with that matter. They stood out to help explain that. As they looked at the sweet gemstone-like fruits in the guard's hands, their faces revealed a look of desire. The guard very quickly brought the fruits to Watson and the other geniuses. Their faces were also filled with doubt and anticipation. Thank you for the gift, Your Majesty. One of them picked up the fruit and took a bite. Then, a powerful aura suddenly appeared on their body. After consuming the sun fruit, 4 wings grew out of his back, along with his fire and light elemental combat aura wings. The 4 wings flapped gently behind his back, bringing with them combat aura ripples that shook the air. I've advanced to gold tier, and I have also grasped the light elemental combat aura. The youth looked at the light elemental combat aura wrapped around his fingers with surprise. With someone taking the lead, the remaining geniuses ate the sun and moon gems. Each of them exuded either light or dark elemental combat auras. For a moment, the entire hall was filled with exclamations. Augustus was sitting in his wheelchair. He also picked up a sun gem and placed it in front of him to size it up. The fragrant smell and the alluring gem-like luster made him bite down on it. Juice slid down his throat. His broken limbs had yet to recover. The sun gem had entered his stomach, his legs, which he could not stand on, began to heal. A powerful force supported him in standing up from where he was. That fruit contains such powerful vitality. Even though it has not improved my level, it has healed my injuries, which I would have needed a few months to heal. And just as His Majesty said, I have awakened a light elemental combat aura. Now, I have become a warrior with both light and fire elements. When he sensed the new combat aura surging in his body, Augustus could not help but feel surprised. The light elemental combat aura had increased his strength by several times. He raised his head. He realized that Nia, from the Saint Laurent family, had also eaten a moon fruit. A dark magic luster appeared on her body. It was obvious that she had also awakened her dark elemental talent. It is as expected of His Majesty to be able to get such a precious thing and give it to us. The king too generous. The king had given them those fruits as he deemed that they were no longer suitable for him. Augustus could not help but feel excited. The king truly loved the people as if they were his children. Not only were the geniuses excited, but even the noblemen gasped as if Emperor Cluck were crowing. Many people had envious expressions in their eyes. If the king had not explicitly asked the geniuses to eat those fruits, they might not have been able to resist snatching those fruits and eating them for themselves. Those children were lucky enough to eat those fruits, and their families were glad. Other families were almost driven mad with envy. King Landhar III, who was sitting on the high seat, looked satisfied. Watson had sold those fruits for wealth, but he was different. He gave them away for favors and gratitude. Most of the noblemen present were grateful to him, and those geniuses who had eaten the sun and moon gems would work for him in the future. The king looked in Watson's direction. He found that everyone had eaten the sun and moon gems, but Watson was staring at the fruit in front of him without moving, so he said, "Watson, what's wrong? Why don't you eat the fruit I gave you? Is it not to your liking, or do you doubt the truth of what I said?" Quote, "Your Majesty, of course, I don't doubt your words. I'm not eating the sun gem, not because it doesn't suit my appetite, but because it's useless to me, so I'm not eating it." Watson smiled. That was one reason he made it up casually. The truth was that he could eat the fruits every day when he was on Mount Creation. Furthermore, the fruits on the Mount of Creation were different from those there. Considering the storage time, he had chosen those that were not fully ripe. He was used to eating ripe fruits, so he did not want to eat those. However, he could not say that to the king, who was obviously using the sun and moon gems to show off in front of the nobleman. If he messed up the king's plan, the other party would definitely not take it well. "Watson, if that's the case, you can choose not to eat it. However, there's no reason to take back what you've been given. That sun gem is yours. You can choose to eat it when you want to or give it to someone else." The king waved his hand when he realized that Watson was not interested. He knew that Watson must have eaten his fair share. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Watson pretended to nod respectfully and picked up the fruit in front of him. At that moment, he heard the labored breathing from around him. Many noblemen stared at the fruit in his hand. The geniuses who had eaten the fruit also looked at him. They licked their lips. Even if they had eaten one fruit, they still longed for the fruit in Watson's hand, especially those who had not eaten it before. It was a pity that it was a banquet organized by the king. Otherwise, those noblemen would have already made an open bid to buy the fruit from Watson. How should we deal with that last sun fruit? We can give it to other people, but it is inappropriate to give only one to anyone. Perhaps we can take bids for that sun fruit. The lowest price is 1,000 gold coins. I will give it to whoever offers the highest price. Watson, you really know how to act. This is His Majesty's banquet. If you don't eat that fruit, you're disrespecting the king. And you still want to sell it at a high price to other people? Do you have any respect for His Majesty? Before the others could react, Augustus, who could stand up because he ate the sun fruit, had already sneered at Watson. He remembered how Watson broke his limbs. He had to mock the younger man when he saw his proud expression. After him, a few other noblemen followed suit. That's right, His Majesty can't bear to eat that fruit himself, but he gave them to us. It shows just how much His Majesty loves us. If it weren't for His Majesty, we wouldn't have been able to eat that precious fruit, let alone sell it for wealth. To exchange His Majesty's generosity for money, Watson, you're really an idiot. The king's generosity? Watson rolled his eyes. If he had not given those things to the king, the ruler would not be able to do that at all. Don't grumble in front of me. His Majesty just said that the sun gem is mine to use, so it is up to me whether I consume it or sell it to others. His Majesty hasn't said anything yet, so why do you have the right to speak? You might as well simply say that you don't want to buy it. If you don't want to buy it, I can sell it to others. Wait, who said that we don't want to buy it? Watson, I want that sun gem. I'll pay 2,000 gold coins. Of course, I'm buying that gem to admire His Majesty's goodwill. I can't eat that gem for free. Augustus, who had just mocked Watson, suddenly spoke and raised 2 fingers. His words sounded odd. After mocking others, he still wanted to buy the item? How could he do such a thing? However, they knew that the fruit was worth even more than 1,000 gold coins. Furthermore, Augustus had wanted to buy that sun fruit in the name of the king. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Of course, they were unwilling to give away such a thing to other people. I will pay 3,000 gold coins. It is also because I respected His Majesty. Quote, I'll pay 5,000 gold coins. After I buy that sun gem, I will not eat it. Instead, I will put it at home so that the children can worship that fruit. They will understand His Majesty's gift to the kingdom. One noble after another expressed their willingness to the fruit. They want to buy it, but they won't eat it? Hearing that, Watson wanted to laugh. Noblemen had always been people who only cared about profit. It would be strange if that group of people bought the sun fruit and did not eat it. They only said that to curry favor with the king. Even though he understood that principle, Watson did not intend to expose it. The highest price has already reached 5,000 gold coins. Is there any higher price? I bid 100,000 gold coins. Suddenly, a cold voice came from the side of Watson. Watson turned his head and saw that the person who bid was a young girl from the Saint Laurent family named Nia. 100,000 gold coins going once, 100,000 gold coins going twice. Watson looked around and found that after Nia's bid, the other noblemen fell into silence. Firstly, they did not dare go against Nia, who was from an archduke's family. Another reason was that Nia's bid for 100,000 gold coins was too high. Charlotte, who had met Nia before, was also there. She was leaning close to Nia and whispering something into her ear. Apparently, Charlotte, who had eaten the moon gem, knew the magical effects of those 2 fruits, which was why she urged Nia to buy them at such a high price. She bid 100,000 gold coins. That crazy woman really dares to bid so high. Augustus' eyes flickered, considering whether he should deliberately raise the price and let Nia buy them at a higher price. After all, Nia and Watson were not on good terms with him. It was good that he had just insulted Watson, and then he could let Nia suffer a more significant loss. He had been stuck at home for more than a week and could not go out. He had to vent his anger that day. Nia, you are too naive to think that you can buy the fruit given with just 100,000 gold coins. The price of that sun gem is not in itself, but in the fact that it was from His Majesty. Therefore, I offer 1,000,000 gold coins. Augustus puffed out his chest and said those harsh words with an overbearing expression. He wanted to bid 1,000,000 gold coins? The crowd was shocked by Augustus' offer and sucked in a breath of cold air. 1,000,000 gold coins to purchase a fruit presented by His Majesty. It was a great sacrifice, even from an archduke's family. Nia, do you still dare to raise the price by 1,000,000 gold coins? If you don't dare to do it, then forget about it. That sun fruit is mine. Since you don't dare to compete with me, you should slip away silently whenever you see me. Afraid that Nia would give up the fruit if he raised the price a little too high, Augustus sneered at Nia after he raised the price, trying to provoke her anger. As expected, even though Nia was still expressionless in the face of those words, her eyes turned cold. I bid 1,500,000 gold coins. You're bidding 1,500,000 gold coins? Nia, you're really rich. I can't compete with you, so I'll let you have it. Augustus chuckled. He had given up. The surrounding noblemen were not fools. They could see that Augustus had deliberately raised the price to get Nia to spend more gold coins. However, that was how the Campbell and the Saint Laurent families usually interacted, so they did not interfere. A new bid with 1,500,000 gold coins. Anyone else? Well then, 1,500,000 going once, 1,500,000 going twice. And 1,500,000 going thrice, Watson said. The surroundings were silent. It seemed like no one would continue to raise the price. After all, 1,500,000 gold coins were not a tiny amount. Many middle-tier nobles only had that much. Since Watson had called the price thrice, Augustus could not help but feel proud. He had to admit that he had held it in for more than a week. When he saw Watson and Nia simultaneously that day, it made him want to vent his anger. The only thing that made him unhappy was that he had let Watson get 1.5 million gold coins for free. However, he would find an opportunity to make Watson spit out the money later. He was not in a hurry. Just as he was thinking about that, Watson announced the result. "Congratulations, young Master Augustus. You have bought that sun fruit at a high price of 1 million gold coins. Please give me the money now." "Nia, that's 1,500,000 gold coins. Pay up." "Wait a minute, Watson, who did you say bought that fruit?" Augustus had already seen Nia's extremely uncomfortable expression when she took out the 1,500,000 gold coins. Suddenly, he realized that Watson did not mention Nia at all. "Yes, young Master Augustus, you don't have to doubt it. I am talking about you. I am selling that fruit to you." Quote, "No, wait, Watson. Nia offered a higher price than me. She offered 1,500,000 gold coins. Why are you selling it to me?" At that moment, he saw Watson's childlike smile that was unique to children his age. "His Majesty said that I can give that fruit to whoever I want. I don't want to sell it to Nia, I want to sell it to you. You just offered 1 million gold coins. You won't go back on your words in front of so many people, right? Besides, didn't you say that the value of the fruit is not in itself? What's important is its added value. It was given by the king. If you don't buy that sun fruit, it proves that what you said just now was a lie. It's a crime to deceive His Majesty." Watson handed the sun fruit to Augustus. "So, young Master Augustus, do you want to buy that sun fruit or not?" "I'll buy it." Since Watson had already said that, Augustus had to buy it even if he did not want to. He gritted his teeth and agreed. He took the sun fruit and whispered to Watson, "Watson, you're too cunning. Just you wait." He had only wanted to trick Nia, but he did not expect Watson to be so shameless as to sell the sun fruit to him forcefully. He had already taken the sun fruit once, and there was no effect that time. Even if it were the moon fruit, it would not cause him any heartache. However, eating the fruit again would only give him a delicious taste. It was equivalent to losing 1,000,000 gold coins. "Young Master Augustus, I'll be waiting for you," Watson responded to Augustus with a smile. He watched Augustus take out a check with a pained expression and sign his name on it. After handing it to him in front of everyone, Watson kept the check and distanced himself from Augustus. "All right, since these geniuses have already eaten the fruits, I believe that you will have higher and further achievements in the future. I hope that you will not disappoint me. That was only the first act before the banquet. Next, I am preparing to perform the second act. Someone, bring me those weapons." The king clapped his hands as he gave his orders from the high throne. The guard who was in charge of carrying the sun and moon fruits appeared once again. At that time, he was carrying a large box. He placed it in the middle of the hall and opened it. Immediately, more than 10 cold-looking weapons were revealed. Those weapons had a unique characteristic. They were all covered in a platinum luster and emitted a platinum-tier aura that distorted the world. Platinum-tier weapons? Heavens! Why are there so many platinum weapons in the kingdom? That's more than what the kingdom had, right? The noblemen discussed animatedly when they saw the weapons. If they had only felt gratitude when King Landhar III distributed the precious sun and moon fruits, then seeing those weapons had turned those feelings into shock. A certain craftsman had created these platinum-tier weapons after much effort. They are prepared to be bestowed upon the geniuses here. I've racked my brains to create these platinum-tier weapons and finally urged the forgers to realize it. From now on, platinum-tier weapons are no longer a symbol of nobility and rarity in the kingdom, like they are treasures that are more valuable than their use. Instead, they are top-notch weapons that can truly be popularized in everyone's hands. King Landhar III's voice sounded at the right time, causing the many noblemen to be even more shocked. Some of them even knelt in front of the king in excitement. "Your Majesty, you are very wise, indeed. It's mind-boggling to think that Your Majesty would do so much." Just by the improvement we saw in the platinum tier weapons production rate, your name is to be recorded in the annals of history and become an outstanding king comparable to past monarchs, your majesty. The noblemen complimented the king. They had always thought that King Landhar III was unfathomable and powerful, but he did not have much outstanding contribution to the kingdom. However, that seemed to have changed when they saw the platinum tier weapons. They finally understood their stupidity. King Landhar III did not only want the throne, but he had also made contributions to the kingdom. The Holy Dragon Kingdom would be invincible in battles against other kingdoms if they could equip their citizens with platinum tier weapons. The enemy's armor would be shattered, and their enemies' attacks could not even break their soldiers' armor. Their generals could win battles with their eyes closed. The kingdom's strength had increased significantly, and the day of expanding its territory was just around the corner. There's something wrong with those weapons. It doesn't look like any forging masters in the kingdom made them. Instead, they seem to be made by Watson. Reed frowned and muttered to himself. Usually, a forging master required superb skills and a combination of good timing and geographical conditions to make platinum tier weapons. Therefore, the appearance of each platinum tier weapon was random, resulting in all kinds of strange platinum tier weapons. However, the weapons in the box in front of him were exactly the same, as if they were carved from the same mold. Reed knew that Watson was the only person who could do such a monstrous thing. Reed, it seems that you have also realized it. That's right, Watson made those weapons. I doubt the things made by Watson would appear in here. Furthermore, His Majesty acted as if he had created those items. Did they come to some agreement, or perhaps Watson was coerced? Antonio stroked his chin, deep in thought. He had felt like something was amiss when the king took out the sun and moon gemstones. Those two gemstones took thousands of years to mature, which was why they had the powerful effect of allowing a person to advance to gold tier directly. He had been very familiar with a certain elf, yet he could only take one of those fruits with him. It was hard to imagine that the king could have more than 10 of those fruits. Even if the king really obtained those fruits with great effort, those platinum tier weapons could not have anything to do with the king at all. He had stayed in the kingdom for decades. The two of them knew the king's abilities well. In fact, it was not just them. Most of the people in the kingdom knew that as well. They had watched King Landhar III grow from a prince to a king, and they would not believe the nonsense that the king was saying at that moment. There was a method to increase the forging rate of platinum tier weapons. Why did King Landhar III not use it when he was fighting for the throne? Why would he use it then? Did he only think of that idea then? A king who did not know how to forge and only knew how to use politics suddenly had an idea to increase the success rate of forging. Was that not a joke? His Majesty must have hired someone capable to modify the success rate of forging platinum tier weapons, allowing His Majesty to take credit for it. Many people were speculating, and at that moment, King Landhar III, who had placed the platinum tier weapons in the main hall, spoke up. Why are all of you so silent? Did my actions scare all of you? Don't worry. There are more surprises to come. Boris, as my kingdom's finance minister, haven't you always complained about the kingdom's lack of funds and advocated reducing military expenses and even the royal family's living expenses? Yes, Your Majesty. Since ancient times, a proverb in the Holy Dragon Kingdom says that only frugality can lead to wealth. Now, due to the kingdom's favorable geographical environment, the population's fertility was overloaded. Coupled with the warm climate, people tend to be lazy. The grain produced is not enough for the entire kingdom to enjoy every year, so it had to be purchased in large quantities from other kingdoms. We need to be thrifty to save some money so that our kingdom can remain strong. The finance minister was a fierce-looking middle-aged man with goldfish eyes. He had answered the king's question righteously. However, before he could finish his answer, the king waved his hand helplessly. Boris, don't say such useless things in front of me. I'll just give you money. Following the king's words, a few guards dragged a massive box into the palace from the back of the hall. The boxes in the hands of those guards were opened, and inside were not platinum weapons but shiny gold coins. The number of coins gathered together was more than 10 million. There are 10 million gold coins here. Minister Boris, is it enough for the kingdom's expenditure? Your Majesty, that. Boris was stunned when he saw the 10 million gold coins. He had always asked His Majesty for more money. Even if it was to build a riverbank to prevent flooding, the king had been reluctant to give him any. How could he be so straightforward that day? He had given him 10 million gold coins. Had His Majesty made a windfall by digging through some ancient ruins? Or did someone give that to him? After being stunned for a few seconds, Boris finally snapped back to his senses and counted with his fingers. Recently, due to the collapse of the Dragonspine snow mountain, the cold wave invasion from the Winter Nation in the north has disrupted our harvest. The allocation of funds for those places requires at least 1 million gold coins. And the recent training of the Dragon Knights and other legions, together with the loss of weapons, requires about 5 million gold coins. Adding the expenses for the ministers in the palace, it is estimated that these 10 million gold coins are barely enough. Quote, "Well, I don't like that it is barely enough. Guards, give Boris an amount that is more than enough for him." King Landhar III clapped his hands, and more guards immediately walked in with more huge boxes. 10 identical boxes were placed on the ground in just a few minutes. They contained shiny gold coins. In total, there were more than 100 million gold coins. "Minister Boris, do you still feel reluctant? Just nod, and I will continue to give you money." Quote, "No need, Your Majesty. That is enough. We can even use it for a few years." Boris knelt on the ground, his voice trembling. "Very well, then don't ask for money from me for a few more years." After speaking to Boris, King Landhar III turned his gaze to another person. General Hone. "Yes, Your Majesty." Hone knelt in front of the king. "I heard that due to the lack of war recently, the soldiers have not paid much attention to the maintenance of our war equipment. During inspections, they found many defensive weapons were not even bronze tier, and some silver tier items were defective. From now on, throw away any weapons that are below gold tier. In the future, I will order the army to be equipped with weapons of gold tier and above. At the same time, generals who have made outstanding military achievements will also be able to obtain platinum tier weapons for free. Come, Hone, you should be the first to choose one of the platinum tier weapons here. That is my reward to you." Quote, "Thank you, Your Majesty," Hone replied respectfully. He picked out a platinum tier weapon from the second round of weapons, attracting the envious gazes of countless ministers and noblemen around him. Next, Minister Makrotov. As the head of the civil officials, you have repeatedly reported that the record parchment that the officials currently use is not only difficult to write on, but it also can't record too many things. I will now allocate 10 million gold coins to replace all the parchment papers in the country with magical paper that gold tier elites can use. At the same time, you can also change the ink and quill pens to gold tier ones. What do you think? Your Majesty, please accept my gratitude on behalf of all the civil servants. I heard that your territory was one of the areas affected by the collapse of the Dragonspine snow mountain. Would you like the taxes on your territory waived for this year? Your Majesty is too kind. We will never forget your kindness. Marquis Raphael, recently, the sales of Raphael Winery have not been very good. Since you contributed a large amount of tax revenue to the kingdom every year, should I give you some of the fruits of the sun and the moon so that you can use them to make wine? Thank you very much, Your Majesty. That is precisely what I need. Quote, Count Bridgestone. In just a few minutes, the king named dozens of noblemen and gave them different things. Every time he gave something to someone, the nobleman would kneel on the ground in excitement. The king felt pleased about that. I've been the king for so many years, and those ministers have always asked me for this and that. It was hard for me to grant their requests then. This is the first time I've given something so readily, and it's also the first time those ministers have thanked me from the bottom of their hearts. As the monarch of a country, other than appearing confident and sturdy on the surface, the king also had many difficulties that were unknown to others. It was true that he held a high position and authority as the monarch. Furthermore, he controlled the resources of a country, and his wealth far surpassed that of the so-called wealthy nobles. However, most of the money did not belong to him. Instead, it was used to maintain the running of the kingdom. In other words, it was public property. With Watson's 100 trillion gold coins, even if he kept squandering his wealth every day, he would not be able to spend all of it. It feels so good to have unlimited wealth. Those ministers can have whatever they want. I can even exceed their expectations and give them a shocking amount. When I see their foolish looks for money or platinum weapons, I can't help but laugh. After being a king for so many years, that is the first time I've experienced such a feeling. King Landhar III sighed in satisfaction. He was a terrifying king in the past, but he was not a king who had outstanding achievements. After all, having abilities and using those abilities to achieve goals were two entirely different things. For the time being, no one would question his accomplishments. Just the amount of money he earned was more than all the previous kings combined. It was enough for him to go down in history and be immortalized. The king was happy, but the noblemen and ministers below the stage were speechless. They finally understood why the king held a banquet that day and had specially sent invitations to every nobleman in the royal city. It seemed very serious. It was because the king had wanted to show off. The banquet was ultimately the king's show of pretentiousness. In a few minutes, dozens of aristocrats had been selected, and the king had already distributed hundreds of millions of gold coins worth of wealth. The aristocrats that had been named felt bitter that they had become the king's stepping stones to pretentiousness. At the same time, they were somewhat happy. Those aristocrats who had not been named were very envious. They did not mind being used by the king to show off. They were only afraid that the king would find no use for them. It meant they would not get any reward from the king. "This is my temporary reward for you. As long as you perform well, I will not mistreat anyone. From now on, the Holy Dragon Kingdom will enter a new chapter and become stronger. However, we've gotten old. The future will belong to the younger generation. I've already said that I look forward to meeting all the geniuses here today, but I still feel the rewards were not enough. Therefore, I will announce the true purpose of this banquet, which is to find a suitable husband for my daughter, Kiana. As my youngest daughter, Kiana, is already 14 years old this year and has reached the age of marriage. However, those who wanted to become my daughter's husband must be young and talented. I will organize a competition at the Royal Academy in 2 days, and geniuses from various families and even ordinary people who are not nobles can register their participation. As long as they win the final championship in the competition, they can become my daughter's future husband. I will personally hold the engagement ceremony. I intend to search for hidden geniuses in the kingdom so that the Holy Dragon Kingdom will be able to enter a truly prosperous era. I hereby announce that the champion will become Kiana's husband and my foster son. He will enjoy the same rights as a prince and have the right to inherit the throne." What? Initially, the king's words did not cause too much reaction from the noblemen. However, the last sentence thoroughly aroused their interest and caused a huge uproar. The competition champion could become the king's foster son and hold the same inheritance rights as a prince. In other words, if the child of a certain family became the champion, then he could become the future king. Even if he could not become the king, marrying the princess would allow him to take a step closer to the king. No one knew the reason for the king's behavior that day. He was very generous with the weapons, the sun gems, and other treasures as well. Then he declared that he was looking for a husband for his daughter. It was as if he was a completely different person. However, they liked the king that day. After all, who would reject a king who controlled countless resources and was also generous with his wealth? "Your Majesty, our family just happens to have a young disciple. I will let him participate in the competition and strive to let him get first place. Our family members will also participate. Whether or not we can get first place is secondary. The most important thing is to respond to Your Majesty's call for talents and let Your Majesty see the elegance of our children." The noblemen scrambled to register. Even Augustus looked at Princess Kiana, who was looking down from above with a lofty gaze. He licked his lips and revealed an undisguised desire. "As long as I win the competition, I will be able to marry the princess and become the future king. I must win that competition." In contrast to the liveliness around him, Watson stood quietly on the spot and even yawned. He had no feelings at all about how the king wanted to marry off the princess. It seemed like the king had decided to take advantage of the situation to find all the hidden geniuses in the kingdom to revive the empire. The king's plan was excellent. However, he was not tempted because he did not need to marry the princess. As long as he killed King Landhar III, he would be the next ruler. While he was thinking about that, Watson felt another gaze on him from above. He subconsciously looked up and realized that the person looking at him was Princess Kiana. She continued to stare at him. "That is strange. Why is she looking at me? Is she dissatisfied with the king's arrangements and is asking me for help?" Chapter 416. The King's Test. The tournament was only 2 days away, and word had traveled quickly that King Landhar III would allow the winner to marry the princess. The news had spread throughout the kingdom through the mouths of the banquet attendees, and it had caused quite a stir. For a time, regardless of whether it was noblemen, ministers, wealthy merchants, or commoners, as long as they had a youth of suitable age in their family, those who were somewhat confident in their abilities all signed up for the Royal Academy to participate in the test. In just a day, the number of people signing up for the tournament at the Royal Academy had increased tenfold. Some faraway families even asked the king for an extension so that their family members could have time to rush there. Some families even sent all their younger members to the royal city to marry the princess. After all, if they could not win, it would be quite reasonable to gain an advantage in numbers and eventually win by luck. For a time, the entire capital was filled with people. Even those who did not originally belong to the Holy Dragon Kingdom were drawn there, causing the number of geniuses in the Royal Academy of the Holy Dragon Kingdom to explode on an unprecedented scale. Of course, those were all things to be discussed in the future. The banquet ended with King Landhar III's shocking words. After that, all the noblemen returned home. At the Campbell family's manor, in between times. That room was the most important room for the Campbell family to study the holy relic. It stored the tools used to cast the relic, and there were all kinds of clocks and dials hanging on the wall. The hands on each clock dial pointed to the 12 o'clock mark. They swayed back and forth at the 12 o'clock mark, neither moving forward nor backward. It was as if time had stopped there. The Campbell family had excavated a diamond-tier holy relic from the Third Era. Time stopped flowing in the space between time, and because of that room, the Campbell family could complete a large amount of research in a short period. The space between those two times, however, was not without flaws. The people who entered that place had to bear tremendous pressure because of the time pause. Therefore, that place would only be used when conducting private and important experiments. At that moment, Augustus was lying in the space. Amidst the stack of holy relics and various instruments, Armand, wearing a work uniform, was standing in front of him. He was looking at Augustus with a complicated gaze. "Augustus, are you sure you want to accept this surgery? Accepting this surgery means that you will fuse with the puppet, and from now on, you will become a half puppet and half human. You have to know that we developed the puppet modification surgery in recent years, and we only completed the first stage of the experiment. Yes, grandfather, I will accept this experiment, even if I lose part of my humanity after the experiment, as long as I can exchange it for enough power. I have no problem with that. Furthermore, the experiment is different from a complete one. I just need to replace parts of my body and turn them into parts of the puppet." Augustus lay on the bed calmly. However, flames were burning in his eyes. That was an experiment that the Campbell family had been conducting in secret. The experimental subjects were initially rats and some low-tier magical beasts, followed by vagrants and slaves. The purpose of that experiment was to verify the possibility of combining a magical tool with a human body. It was something they might be able to mass produce. The Campbell family was able to create exquisite puppets because they had been experimenting on humans. However, that was the first time they had modified a member of their family. Faced with Augustus' determined gaze, Armand sighed again. "Your father was adamant in opposing this experiment. I don't think this experiment will be of any help to your future either. Once you accept the modification, even though you can obtain great power now, your limit threshold will be lowered." Quote, Augustus was the most talented genius in the Campbell family. He was already a peak gold tier elite at a young age. He could even display the strength of a platinum tier elite. Augustus would definitely reach the platinum tier in a few years. It was not impossible for him to become another sword saint or even surpass the diamond tier. However, if he accepted the experiment, the power of the puppet parts implanted in his body would be fixed. If he wanted to improve further, he would have to get more powerful parts. It would be impossible for him to improve by training alone. "Grandfather, I've made up my mind. Augustus, I have to say that your personality is very similar to mine. Since you've made up your mind, it's useless no matter what I say next. It might be a little painful. Bear with it." A sharp scalpel appeared in Armand's hand, and he used it to cut Augustus' body. Then, a scream was heard. "Watson, just you wait. I may not be as good as you in terms of strength, and I'm not a match for you in terms of talent either. Since that's the case, I'll sacrifice my future in exchange for a chance to kill you." A week ago, you broke the bones in my body in front of everyone in the capital. 2 days later, I'll break your head in the competition in 2 days. His hands and feet were cut open. The bones had been taken out and replaced with holy relic swords that had been polished to diamond-tier brilliance. His flesh had also been dug out. The remains of the King of Time puppet left behind by Watson had been injected into his body. Augustus revealed a fierce expression. The King of Time had been left behind after Watson had traded it for the Campbell family's holy relics. The two pieces of the King of Time's remains had been pieced together but not been resurrected. The Campbell family did not go anywhere to conduct detailed research on that puppet. As a result, they only had minimal results. Since the King of Time had fused with the Clock of Life, a significant amount of time and life energy had accumulated in its body. When they fused the remains of the King of Time with rats or other magical beasts, the subject could gain the ability to pause time to a certain extent. That discovery greatly encouraged the Campbell family. At the same time, it was also the reason Armand had dared to use the puppet modification experiment on Augustus. His grandson was already very strong. If he could give him the ability to pause time, his strength would increase by 10 times more. Of course, the King of Time was fused by Watson. It was not realistic to simply use its power to defeat Watson. Therefore, Augustus chose to fuse all the holy relics in his family into his body. The holy relics that were given to Watson were not all from the Campbell family. The Campbell family had more than 100 holy relics, and at that time, to satisfy Augustus' requirements, Armand decided to use half of them. More than 50 diamond-tier holy relics were broken and poured into Augustus' flesh. Who knew what kind of monster he would be? Watson, you only have 2 days left to live. Savor the last remnants of your life. Remember my name? It is Augustus. That is the name of the person who will kill you. Quote, Augustus was the name of a consul in the Tudor dynasty in the 12th era. It was said that the consul was extremely brutal and powerful. During his reign, he conquered more than 7 kingdoms and massacred millions of people. Augustus' father, Newman, gave him that name, hoping that he could become an official who could shake the kingdom like the ancient Augustus. Augustus had always been proud to imitate that ancient archon. Since Watson had defeated him, his reputation had been ruined. In order to regain everything he had before, he had to be even more ruthless toward others and himself. While Augustus was undergoing the puppet modification experiment, on the other side of the Saint Laurent family, Nia was sitting on the balcony of a villa near the garden. One of her outstretched hands was covered in an icy cold color, while the other was covered in darkness. At a specific moment, the black and icy snowflakes converged and turned into a dark color. When the dark snow fell on her, it immediately covered the balcony with a layer of solid ice. On the balcony, there were a few well-grown potted plants. The flowers on them maintained their blooming posture and turned into ice sculptures. Sister Nia, it's already so late, and you're still not asleep? Also, you've secretly released your power. You're clearly forbidden to do that here. If the patriarch knew about that, he would definitely punish you again. Behind Nia, a woman's voice was heard. Charlotte, who was wearing a white nightgown, came behind Nia with a conflicted expression. She looked at the solid black ice under her feet and shivered. In an instant, the entire balcony was sealed in ice. One could imagine how terrifying that was, and that was even before Nia cast a spell. Charlotte, I just awakened the dark elemental power in me during the day, so I want to test how different it is from my usual ice magic. Charlotte, am I wrong to do that? Quote, Nia turned her head and asked expressionlessly, her eyes full of doubt. No, it's fine if you want to practice magic, but your power is too strong. If you accidentally leak it, it might kill some of our family members. Charlotte hesitated for a moment but still reminded her. As a member of the Saint Laurent family, it was her duty to remind Nia at all times. When she was with Watson, Charlotte secretly compared Nia to Watson, and in the end, she felt like Nia was stronger. It was not without reason that she would make such a guess. Nia was a monster. It was not the kind of monster that was used to describe people, but the literal meaning. From the moment Nia was born, her body contained a powerful ice elemental power. If it were just that, it would have been fine. As she had that power, Nia's emotional awareness had always been weak, especially in terms of human values. Nia could not distinguish between good and bad. When she was young, Nia turned her friends into ice sculptures because she was playing with them. However, the head of the family did not punish Nia too much. He only set a rule for all guests to stay away from the place where Nia lived. At the same time, everyone who came into contact with Nia had to remind her of what she should and should not do. If anyone were to die because of their own carelessness, the Saint Laurent family would not be responsible for that. Nia, known as the Ice Demoness, and Augustus, known as the Flame Consul, had become the jewels in the royal city. However, Charlotte thought that the arrogant Augustus was not comparable to Nia. If the girl had not restrained herself when she was outside, Augustus would have died several times already. "Charlotte, were you trying to comfort me?" Nia remained expressionless after hearing Charlotte's words. She clenched her fist, and the black snowflakes in her palm disappeared. The black ice on the ground also disappeared. However, the potted plant that had been frozen into an ice sculpture did not recover. It shattered with a crisp sound, and its leaves and flowers withered rapidly before they turned into ashes. Looking at the bleak scene of the withered petals, Nia felt a little lonely. "I know that I'm different from normal people. I can't feel what others can feel. What others find interesting seems boring to me. Most of my family members also don't like to be with me. Charlotte, you are the only person who would accompany me." "Thank you, Sister Nia, you're too kind," Charlotte replied bitterly. She was not accompanying Nia because she liked her. Her status was similar to Nia's. Her family sent her to take care of Nia. "At the banquet tonight, you told me to spend a lot of money to buy that sun gem. I should thank you, even though I did not manage to buy it in the end. It should not be a problem for me to say thank you at a time like this, right? Or should I act regretful now?" Nia tilted her head once again. "Just thank me," Charlotte replied while sighing in her heart. Nia did not have any human emotions. All her feelings were based on her experience and her daily imitation of humans. If someone told Nia to smile, Nia would laugh and remember that. In the future, whenever she heard something similar, Nia would laugh too. Sometimes, when things get complicated, Nia does not know how to deal with them. For example, when Charlotte told her to buy the sun fruit, but she did not manage to buy it, should she thank Charlotte or express her regret? "Is that so?" Nia nodded. "The competition at the Royal Academy is in 2 days. The Patriarch asked me to do my best on it. It doesn't matter even if I kill the other party. This is the first time the Patriarch gave me such an order. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Speaking of the competition, Watson will also participate, right? You said that he is a person who takes care of his friends. Killing him is definitely not a good thing, but disobeying the Patriarch's order is also bad. What should I do?" Charlotte did not answer Nia's question. She only pursed her lips, feeling conflicted. She did not know what to do either. She could only hope that Watson was strong enough not to be afraid of Nia or that he would be eliminated before he met Nia. Otherwise, if he met Nia, he might lose his life. At the banquet, the king had proposed that the winners of the tournament could marry the princess. Since some of the outstanding children in some families were not men, King Landhar III added another rule: women could also participate in the tournament. If a woman were to win, she did not have to marry the princess. Instead, she would receive a generous reward, reserved for the one who would inherit the throne. The Royal Academy's tournament in 2 days will be very tragic. After all, Watson invited Lily and me to enjoy fine wine and precious food in the Holy Dragon Tavern. I have to tell him this news. Even if I can't let him win the match, I have to keep him alive. I'll go and look for him tomorrow morning. The more she thought about it, the more worried Charlotte was about how Watson might be injured in the match 2 days later. She could not bear it and quietly clenched her fists as she made a decision. King Landhar III's bedroom in the palace. "Watson, do you have the confidence to win the tournament that's in 2 days?" King Landhar III sat cross-legged by the bed as he held a crystal-clear grape in his hand. He raised his eyebrows and questioned the young man standing in front of him. The hall was empty. It was the middle of the night. The moonlight shone through the huge window, turning the pillars and exquisite sculptures into silhouettes on the ground. Watson replied calmly, "Your Majesty, no one knows the result before the competition begins." "So you're saying that you don't have the confidence to win?" King Landhar III released his fingers and allowed the sparkling and translucent grapes to fall to the ground. Then, he stood up and crushed them with a stomp. His face was filled with anger. King Landhar III said, "Watson, do you know why I prepared that event?" I indeed wanted to use that event to rope in more geniuses and allow more capable people to come to the Royal Academy. However, I can't bear to let my daughter marry an incompetent person. Her future husband must be someone from a good family with outstanding military strength and wisdom. Therefore, that event is meant for you. Now, you're telling me that you don't have any confidence in winning? Quote, Your Majesty, there are many capable people in the kingdom. I really can't guarantee that I will be the victor. I saw many geniuses today, and more geniuses will emerge after your announcement, Watson replied humbly, but he was unmoved. King Landhar sighed helplessly. Watson, I admit defeat. How are you so calm at such a young age? If it were me at your age, with such talent and strength, I'm afraid I would be 100 times more arrogant than you. You're so young, yet you give me the illusion of an old man. That is not a good thing. The king's anger was feigned, but he spoke the truth. He had prepared that event for Watson. Previously, Watson had pulled him into the Severed Fingers gang, which was equivalent to setting him up. It was his turn to set Watson up. He wanted to let Watson know that he was in charge of the kingdom. In addition to playing Watson, he also wanted to bind Watson to himself. Previously, Watson had signed a soul contract with him, saying he would never betray him, but he did not feel at ease. If Watson could be with his daughter, Kiana, and the two of them had a child, then Watson would not have any ill intentions toward him for the sake of the child. Marriage was a power tactic that most kings would use, and so would King Landhar III. Watson was strong, so he must have good genes. Even if his child was not exceptionally talented, he could not be weak. Therefore, if Watson still bore him ill will even if he and Kiana were together, King Landhar III could eliminate Watson and raise the child to increase the royal family's fighting power. King Landhar III had thought a lot about that. When he raised his head, he found that Watson's expression was even more sluggish than before. He even yawned lazily. The king did not know how he should react to that. He did not know how to evaluate Watson. He thought that the young man was unparalleled in the world. He had strength and wisdom that did not match his age. He could rely on his own strength to suppress a vicious person with severed fingers. He even dared to plot against a king like him. It was not wrong to say that Watson did not know the etiquette and lacked the necessary common sense. He dared to hold that event because he did not believe that anyone could beat Watson. He did not know how he got the precious fruits from the Forest of Eternity and even created many platinum-tier weapons. Those were things that even Antonio and Reed could not do, let alone the geniuses from the younger generation. One could imagine what kind of monster Watson was. At the banquet, King Landhar III claimed that he was the one who did all that. When he saw the crowd's shocked gazes, he felt very comfortable. At the same time, he wondered if those ministers would be even more surprised if they knew that the one who did all that was a 12 or 13-year-old child. King Landhar III was confident that he would not be able to accept it if someone from the younger generation could defeat Watson. After all, it was enough for the kingdom to produce one freak every few hundred years. If there were two, he was afraid that his heart would not be able to withstand it. King Landhar III wanted to make himself clear. Watson, what do you think of my daughter? I do have some thoughts, but I don't know if I can tell you, Your Majesty. Watson recalled the gaze that the princess threw at him at the banquet. He could not help but frown and reach out to stroke his chin. Oh, no matter what your thoughts are, you can say it. Quote, King Landhar III's eyes lit up. Watson, who had been vehemently denying the topic, seemed interested. If he had known earlier, he would not have asked Watson if he could have won the competition. He could have just asked Watson if he liked Kiana. He was very confident in his daughter. After all, she was a princess. No one else could compare to her identity, education, abilities, and even beauty. It seemed like even a heaven-defying youth like Watson would be attracted to a beautiful girl. King Landhar III felt proud. After hesitating for a moment, Watson asked, Your Majesty, how do you usually treat your daughter? Do you often accompany her? In other words, how is your relationship with her? Because I'm busy with official business, I can't often accompany Kiana. It's the same for the other princes as well. Although I can't often accompany her, I still bring gifts when I visit her. I feel happy every time I see Kiana. That child treats my gifts given as treasures. Therefore, I think that my relationship with her is not bad. As if he did not expect Watson to ask that, King Landhar III continued to say, Watson, Why are you asking me all this? Are you trying to determine if I'm a good father? He had not even won the competition, yet he was already concerned about her as Kiana's boyfriend? The king thought that Watson's only purpose for asking that was to make him smile. Since ancient times, a hero would always be troubled by beautiful women. He was not afraid of Watson's outstanding ability, but he was worried that Watson did not have any weaknesses because people without flaws were the scariest. Yes, Your Majesty, if what you said is true, then I am even more surprised. What's so strange about it? Why did Her Highness look at me so frequently at the banquet just now? Especially after you announced that you would betroth her to the winner of the competition. I thought that you might have some conflict with her, so you wanted to marry her off. And she was worried about her situation, so she kept giving me hints with her eyes, asking me to save her. Watson, you. King Landhar III stared at Watson for a long time. His expression changed from confusion to shock and then to disbelief. Finally, he moved his lips, wanting to say something, but he began to cough violently. Your Majesty, are you all right? Did my words make you feel awkward? Your Majesty, don't worry. I'm a very tight-lipped person. I won't tell anyone about this. Quote, King Landhar III roared in his heart. His thoughts were completely different from Watson's words. They were even on the same channel. He thought that Watson had taken a fancy to Kiana, which was why he asked so many questions. In the end, Watson only asked those questions because he was worried about Kiana. What was Watson thinking? Watson, other than the strange thoughts in your head, can we have a normal conversation? I'll ask you directly. I have high hopes for you, so I want to marry my daughter to you. Will you agree? I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Your daughter is a good person. It's just that we're not suitable. Watson. King Landhar III interrupted him angrily. Watson had dared to use the good person excuse. He had been in power for so many years, and nothing could shake his heart. At that moment, he felt as if he could not control his emotions. The king took a few deep breaths to calm his anger finally. His expression was still livid. He turned away from Watson's innocent face, or else he might get angry again. Watson, I want to know why my daughter is not worthy of you. No matter what, I am a king. Even if you are Antonio and Reed's disciple, marrying my daughter would not be a disgrace to your status, right? Not to mention that marrying my daughter would grant you the right to be a king. Is that not attractive to you? Your Majesty, you must be joking. I did not say that Princess Kiana is not good enough for me, but I am not good enough for her. As for the right to be king, that is quite attractive to me. However, I am still young, so there is no rush. I am only 12 years old now. Even if I become a king, I might not be able to make the ministers submit to me. At least when I come of age, you might already be dead. Then, whether I become a king or not, it won't matter anymore. Watson, get lost. King Landhar III almost spat out a mouthful of blood. If the person in front of him was not Watson, he really wanted to kill them. What did Watson mean he would be dead? He was still in his prime and could live for a long time. If there's nothing else, Your Majesty, I shall take my leave now. Watson scratched his head and turned to walk out. Wait, Watson, I have something else to ask you. I almost forgot the real reason I asked you to come. Watson had only taken 2 steps when King Landhar III stopped him. Judging from his voice, he had become much calmer, making Watson's heart skip a beat. He had deliberately said something to anger King Landhar III, so that the king would chase him away in a fit of rage. Watson did not want to talk to the king alone because he had a feeling that something terrible would happen. Yes, Your Majesty, it will be very tiring if I tell you about it. Come with me. King Landhar III lifted the bed with a mysterious smile and opened a hidden door panel, revealing a slanted tunnel. This is my secret. Even my trusted aides and maids do not know about this. You are the first person other than me to enter this place. Come. Then, King Landhar III entered the secret passage that lit up with the orange glow of torches. Your Majesty, I suddenly have a stomach ache. Please allow me to go home and use the toilet. Watson raised his hand. It was just as he had expected. It was definitely not a good thing for King Landhar III to ask for him. It was so dark under the tunnel. He did not know what was there. What if there were many traps inside, or if King Landhar III had set up an ambush in advance so that he could control it after he entered? Watson, don't perform that poor acting in front of me. Haven't you already declared your loyalty to me? What, are you going to disobey my orders? All right, Your Majesty, I'll come. Watson could only sigh and pinch his nose as he entered the tunnel with King Landhar III. The tunnel was very dark and long. As soon as they entered, they were greeted by a wave of damp and cold air. The air could not make an elite like Watson feel uncomfortable, but he still shuddered because there was an inexplicable smell in the air, as if something was rotten and smelly. After careful examination, he realized that it was the smell of blood. In short, it was filled with evil. After Watson entered, King Landhar III looked backward at him. Without saying anything, he quietly walked in front with a torch in his hand. The passage was silent, they could only hear their footsteps. After walking for an unknown distance, an open space suddenly appeared in front of him. King Landhar III's voice said, "We're here." Watson looked forward and found a secret room in front of him. Most of the walls around the secret room had collapsed. A few bookshelves used to store books were filled with dust, and cobwebs were on the bookshelves. The books on the bookshelves were not dusty. It looked like they were often flipped through, and a huge bright red magic circle was carved on the floor of the secret room. The stench that Watson had smelled came from the floor. "Your Majesty, what is this place?" "This is the secret place that I found in the palace. It should be an underground shelter built by a previous king. It had collapsed for some unknown reason, and from then on, it became the place where I met those guys. It's time for you to see them." With a chuckle, King Landhar III inserted the torch in his hand into the ground. The flame instantly changed from red to green, and as the color of the flame changed, strange-looking shadows suddenly appeared on the walls around them. There were monsters with dragon tails and a human upper body. There were also monsters with panther heads, wings, and densely packed light wheels on their backs. "King Landhar III, you are a man of integrity, indeed. I asked you to bring that young man here to sacrifice him, but I did not expect you to bring him to us so soon. We haven't had the chance to descend yet, so I have to compliment you." The moment the strange shadows appeared, a terrifying pressure covered the entire secret chamber. At the same time, a neutral and ear-piercing voice sounded. "Brat, I didn't manage to kill you the last time I possessed the unicorn. Instead, you humiliated me. I am Goddess Sidi, one of the 7 gods of the kingdom, and this time I will take revenge for what happened last time." 7 gods? Sidi? What's going on? As he felt the intense pressure from the wall, Watson stopped breathing for a few seconds. Even though he was a Diamond Tier elite and could grasp the Divine Kingdom's power, at that moment, his body trembled in the sticky air. The 7 shadows that appeared in front of him were the projections of Starlight Tier gods. Unlike the last time, the gods' projection was even more powerful, and there were more of them. The aura of the gods, which was different from that of human beings, was like an ocean that was about to drown the entire place. "Your Majesty, you brought me here to kill me?" Although he had a feeling that his previous actions would not convince King Landhar III entirely, Watson never thought that the king would actually want to kill him. He was even showing off the things he got from him at the banquet. He even talked to him about Kiana, and then he turned around and attacked him. That was too quick of a change. "I'm sorry, Watson, you signed a soul contract with me and also agreed to let me join the Severed Fingers gang. However, I made an agreement with these guys first. I'm a person who abides by the agreement, so I understand the rules. Of course, you agreed to be my friend. How about this? I won't let you die, but I'll give your body to these guys. I guarantee that I'll find another suitable body for you." King Landhar III announced his plan with a sincere look on his face. Watson could not help but clench his teeth when he heard that. That cunning fox actually had that idea. It turned out that he wanted to separate his soul from his body, turning his body into a carrier for the gods. It would not kill him, but it was almost the same as killing him. The powers that Watson had obtained after painstakingly using the fusion system would disappear, and it was not certain if he could retain the system without his body. With those gone, his idea of overthrowing the monarch would remain a dream. Should I show my true strength here and kill King Landhar III? Watson thought to himself. The king had already said that he did not intend to take his life. If he did not give up his body, it would be equivalent to betrayal, and the soul oath he had taken was fake. The king no longer trusted him. However, if he gave up his body, he would lose everything. Compared to the latter, the former was indeed more acceptable. Watson looked at King Landhar III subconsciously as he thought about that. He realized that the king was also looking at him. The other party's deep eyes seemed to have become bottomless under the illumination of the bewitching green torch, which made Watson alarmed. A layer of cold sweat appeared on his back. Suddenly, he thought of a possibility. What if the king brought him there not to kill him but to see if he could resist the threat of the gods? What if King Landhar III did not fully believe in the oath he had made before and deliberately tested him? What should he do? He recalled how King Landhar III had discussed his victory in the competition and whether he liked Kiana. In addition, the king had been secretly watching him with a scrutinizing gaze ever since he entered that place. Watson felt like the possibility of that guess was very high because if he wanted to kill him, he would not need to talk to him. The more important reason was that the king had just been angry with him. No one would be angry with a person who was about to die. He was not sure if his thoughts were correct, but Watson was prepared to take a gamble. Since your majesty has said that, it seems that I have no choice but to agree. After exchanging a glance with the king, Watson smiled and looked around the walls. As the 7 gods that protect the Holy Dragon Kingdom, you are indeed powerful. I am willing to offer my body to you, but I have a question. Brat, what question do you have? Since you are about to die, I will kindly answer it for you. The one who spoke was a female deity with a leopard's head and wings on the wall. Well, you are a god, so why do you want my body? Because there's something we need in your body. We can't tell you what it is. Very well, since you're not telling me that, then, I'll ask again. My second question is, I only have one body, but you have 7. How are you going to divide my body? Do you plan to live in it together? After Watson asked his question, the surroundings suddenly fell into a short period of silence. Then, Sidi's voice sounded again. What a ridiculous child. Don't tell me you're trying to use such a childish question to split us. We're tired of your little tricks. So, brat, your body is mine, of course. I was the one who possessed the unicorn to take over your body. You even killed a part of my projection. If I don't get it, it doesn't make sense at all. I think the other gods won't have any objections. Sidi's loud voice echoed in the secret room. As soon as she finished speaking, the other gods spoke. Sidi, what nonsense are you spouting? We do have a lot of objections to that. I have to admit, Sidi, you did a very good job in that operation. We express our gratitude to you. But don't be so ungrateful that you'd try to take that youth's body. Watson let out a long sigh as the gods quarreled. As a mortal, all he could think of was the system. One system could not be split into 7 equal parts. Therefore, even if the gods knew that he was trying to sow discord among them, they could only voluntarily fall into his trap.